The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead like frozen tears as I watched my mother-in-law adjust my daughter's dress for the 5th time, her perfectly manicured nails digging just a little too deep into the fabric, into my child's shoulder, into my life, as always. I'm Jordan, and this is supposed to be my 10th wedding anniversary celebration. The grand ballroom at the Belmont Hotel is filled with 300 of our closest friends, most of them Milena's carefully curated social circle. My own friends are scattered around like seeds in a garden that was never meant for them. "Violet, darling, stand up straight," Milena cooed, her voice dripping with honey-coated venom. "A proper young lady never slouches. Your mother should have taught you that by now." I caught my daughter's eye and gave her our secret wink. At 11, Violet already understood the game better than I did at 24 when I first married into this circus. "Actually, Mom taught me ballet," Violet replied sweetly. "My posture's perfect." Milena's smile tightened like a noose. I stepped forward, champagne flute in hand. "The photographer's ready for family photos, Milena. Why don't you gather Ivan and Skylar?" She glided away, her red designer dress a slash of blood against the cream and gold decor. The moment she was gone, I knelt beside my daughter. "You okay, baby?" "I'm fine, Mom." Violet smoothed her dress. "Grandma's extra scary tonight." "Extra something," I muttered, watching Milena corner Ivan across the room. My husband caught my eye and smiled apologetically as his mother gestured dramatically about something, probably my choice of centerpieces. "Jordan!" Stella appeared at my elbow, her voice low. "Everything's set?" I nodded slightly, my heart racing despite years of preparation. "Is she here? In position? You're sure about this?" 10 years, Stella. 10 years of accidental party snubs, sabotaged job interviews, and whispered rumours about my unstable family background. I watched Milena air-kiss another socialite. "Remember when she told the preschool board I had a drinking problem? God, that was awful." The way she played concerned mother-in-law while trying to get Violet transferred to her preferred school. "Tonight it ends," I said, squeezing Stella's hand. "Every receipt, every text, every recorded conversation. I've got it all." The orchestra struck up a waltz. Ivan appeared, handsome in his tuxedo, genuine warmth in his eyes as he held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Gonzalez?" I let him pull me close, breathing in his familiar cologne. For a moment, I almost wavered. He didn't know what was coming. Couldn't know. His blind spot for his mother was the crack in our foundation from day one. "Happy anniversary, love," he whispered, spinning me under the chandeliers. "Thank you for 10 amazing years." Over his shoulder I saw Milena watching us, her lips curved in that knowing smile she wore whenever she had something nasty planned. She thought tonight was her masterpiece, her final crushing blow to the daughter-in-law who never measured up. The dance ended. Ivan kissed my cheek and was immediately pulled away by Ricardo to discuss some business matter, right on schedule. I checked my phone. 9:45 p.m. Almost time. "Mum!" Violet appeared at my side. "Grandma's acting weird, weirder than usual." I followed her gaze. Milena was by the entrance, practically vibrating with anticipation. She kept checking her phone, then the door, then her phone again. "It's okay, sweetie. Go find your brother and get some cake." Stella materialized with a fresh glass of champagne. "You're still so calm. How are you so calm?" "Because I know something Milena doesn't." I took a sip, savouring the bubbles. "She thinks she's the only one who can play this game." The ballroom doors burst open. A stunning woman in a flowing green dress stumbled in, mascara running down her face. The music screeched to a halt. "Ivan!" she cried out, one hand pressed dramatically to her stomach. "Ivan, you can't ignore me anymore, not in my condition." The room went dead silent. 300 heads turned toward my husband, who stood frozen, confusion etched across his face. Milena's triumphant smile bloomed like a poisonous flower. She took a step toward me, designer heels clicking on marble. "Oh dear," she whispered just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. What a terrible shock this must be for you. I met her gaze steadily, letting her see nothing but calm in mine. No shock at all, Milena. In fact, I've been expecting her. Her smile faltered. Just slightly, just enough. The show was about to begin. The woman in green, Remington, made her way to the centre of the ballroom, each sob perfectly timed. I had to admire her acting skills. No wonder she'd caught Milena's eye for this performance. "Ivan, please," she wailed. "I'm 12 weeks along. You can't just pretend nothing happened between us." My husband's face had gone from confused to pale. I don't know you. I've never seen you before in my life." Phones were out everywhere recording, exactly as planned. "Don't lie." Remington pulled out her phone. "I have proof. Ricardo, would you help me?" Ricardo, looking bewildered, took her phone and connected it to the ballroom's projection system. Within seconds, text messages filled the massive screen behind the orchestra. "Miss you already, beautiful. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." The timestamps stretched back months. The crowd gasped and murmured. I heard Skylar whisper, "Oh my God, Ivan!" "These are fake," Ivan said, his voice rising. "I didn't send these. I would never—" "There's more," Remington interrupted, her voice breaking perfectly. She nodded to Ricardo, who swiped to the next screen. Photos appeared, carefully staged shots of intimate dinners, walks in the park, even one of them kissing in shadow. Milena stepped forward, her face a mask of concern. "Jordan, darling, perhaps we should take this somewhere private." "Oh, no," I said loudly. "Let's keep it right here. In fact," I raised my voice, "Remington, why don't you tell everyone exactly how much you were paid for tonight's performance?" The room went silent. Milena's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about," Remington said, but her voice wavered. "For real this time?" "No." I pulled out my own phone. "Should we play the recording of your meeting with Milena at the Starbucks on 5th Street? The one where she promised you $10,000 to destroy her son's marriage?" Milena's face went from porcelain to ash. "You're being hysterical. Or maybe," I continued, "we should show everyone the bank transfer, the contract you made her sign, the rehearsal videos." "Enough!" Milena's voice cracked like a whip. "This is ridiculous. Ivan, tell your wife she's embarrassing herself." But Ivan was staring at his mother, something shifting in his eyes. "Mom, what did you do?" Remington looked between us, then set her shoulders. We'd rehearsed this moment, but her genuine shame made it more powerful. "I'm sorry," she said, addressing the room. "I'm an actress. Mrs. Gonzalez hired me 3 weeks ago to pretend to be Ivan's mistress. The texts are fake. The photos are staged. None of it's real." The crowd erupted. Phones lifted higher, recording every second. Skylar pressed a hand to her mouth, tears in her eyes. "You're lying," Milena hissed, but her perfect composure was cracking. "You're both lying." "The receipt for the green dress," I announced. "The script she made you memorize, the email chain discussing payment. It's all here." I held up a thick manila envelope. 10 years of evidence, actually. Every scheme, every sabotage, every little cruel moment. I kept it all. Ivan stepped toward me, his face ashen. "Jordan, what are you saying?" "Your mother has been trying to destroy our marriage since day one. Tonight was supposed to be her masterpiece." I met Milena's eyes, but she didn't count on me being smarter than she thought. "I warned my son you weren't special," Milena spat, abandoning pretense. "Now everyone knows what a fool he married." The words hung in the air like smoke, but instead of flinching, I smiled. "No, Milena, now everyone knows exactly who you are." Remington stepped forward, phone out. "I recorded everything. Our meetings, the payment discussion, her instructions about how to hurt you both publicly." She looked at Ivan. "I'm so sorry. I needed the money, but what your mother planned, it was cruel." "Mom!" Skylar's voice cracked. "How could you do this?" Milena spun in a circle, finding nothing but shocked, disgusted faces. Her carefully curated social circle was witnessing her unravelling in real time. "This isn't over," she snarled at me. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. "You're right, because that envelope, it's just the beginning. Should we talk about the trust fund you've been stealing from? The charitable donations you've been skimming? Or maybe—" I smiled sweetly. "We should discuss what really happened to Ivan's father's will." The colour drained from her face completely. "Jordan," Ivan said behind me, his voice hollow. "What else haven't you told me?" I turned to face my husband, my heart heavy but my spine straight. "Everything, Ivan. It's time you knew everything." The orchestra had long since stopped playing. 300 guests stood frozen, watching the real drama unfold. And in the centre of it all, Milena, the puppet master who'd finally tangled in her own strings. Act 2 was about to begin. Let me tell you how I caught Milena at her own game. 3 weeks ago, I noticed something off about her. She was too happy, too smug during our weekly family dinner. She kept glancing at her phone, smirking. "Ricardo," I called across the ballroom now, "remember when you mentioned seeing Milena at that little cafe on 3rd Street, the one where she never goes?" Ricardo nodded slowly, comprehension dawning on his face. "She was with a younger woman. I thought it was strange." "That was our first meeting," Remington confirmed, stepping forward. "She found me through a casting agency, said she needed someone for a private performance." I pulled up a chair, settling into it like a storyteller at a campfire. The crowd drew closer, hungry for details. "Tell them what she asked you to do, Remington." "She wanted me to destroy a marriage," Remington said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "She showed me photos of Ivan, told me to study his schedule, learn his habits. She wanted it to seem real." Milena tried to interrupt, but Skylar grabbed her arm. "Let her finish, Mother." "The thing is," I continued, "Milena's not as careful as she thinks. She used her regular email to contact the casting agency, her regular phone to text Remington, her own credit card to buy the dress. Amateur moves," Stella muttered from beside me, earning a few nervous laughs from the crowd. "But here's where it gets interesting." I stood up, walking toward Milena. 2 days after Ricardo saw you, I had lunch at that same cafe. And guess who was working there?" Remington raised her hand slightly. "I'm a waitress there 3 days a week. When Jordan came in, I recognized Ivan from the photos. I couldn't go through with it without telling her." "You broke our agreement," Milena hissed. "No, Mother," Ivan cut in, his voice hard. "You broke every agreement, every trust, every—" He ran his hands through his hair, distress evident in every movement. "Ivan, darling, you can't believe—" "Show him the trust fund documents," Skylar suddenly said. Everyone turned to her in surprise. "Show him what you did with Dad's money." I pulled papers from the envelope. "Your father left both you and Skylar equal shares, Ivan. But Milena convinced the executor to alter the terms. She's been controlling both portions for years. That's why you couldn't access your inheritance when you wanted to start your own business," Skylar added. "That's why I couldn't buy the gallery. Mum made sure we stayed dependent on her." Ivan took the papers with trembling hands. "The signatures, these are forged. Just like she forged Dad's signature on those last-minute changes to his will," Skylar pressed on, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. "I found the original will last month, hidden in her study. That's why I've been helping Jordan gather evidence." The revelation hit the room like a thunderbolt. Milena's carefully constructed world was crumbling brick by brick. "Skylar," Milena whispered, "my own daughter, betraying me. No, Mom, you betrayed us. All of us. For years." I watched my sister-in-law stand taller, throwing off decades of manipulation. Behind her, Violet had crept back into the room, watching with wise eyes. "Mom!" she called out. "Is Grandma going to jail?" The innocent question landed like a punch. Several guests gasped. Milena swayed slightly. "No, sweetie," I said carefully. but Grandma is going to have to explain a lot of things to a lot of people. Starting with the board of her charitable foundation, Ricardo added, pulling out his phone. As a fellow board member, I'm obligated to report financial discrepancies. You can't prove anything, Milena snapped, but her voice shook. Actually, Remington spoke up, I recorded everything, including your detailed explanation of how you've been moving money around. You really shouldn't trust strangers with your secrets. I stepped closer to my mother-in-law, close enough to smell her expensive perfume. You know what your biggest mistake was, Milena? Thinking I was just some naive girl you could bully forever. But I learned from you. Every scheme, every manipulation, I watched and waited. And unlike you, I made sure to get everything in writing. Why? She whispered. Why go to all this trouble? Because my daughter asked me last month why Grandma hates us so much. I felt tears prick my eyes, but kept my voice steady. Because my husband deserves to know the truth about his mother. Because sometimes the only way to end abuse is to drag it into the light. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in abandoned cocktail glasses. Milena stood alone in the centre, her perfect makeup starting to run, her designer dress suddenly looking like costume armour. Ivan, she pleaded, turning to her son. You can't let her do this to me. But Ivan was already walking away, the trust fund documents clutched in his hand, heading for the hotel's business centre to make copies. I sat back down in my chair, suddenly exhausted but far from finished. Now, I announced to the room, who'd like to hear about the fake CPS reports? 3 years ago, I began, my voice carrying across the hushed ballroom. Someone reported me to Child Protective Services. The allegations were serious: drug abuse, neglect, endangerment. Milena's face twitched. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, no doubt remembering the whispered rumours she'd spread. The investigation was hell. They interviewed Violet at school, questioned our neighbours, searched our home. I pulled out another document. But here's the interesting part. The report came from an anonymous source using a burner phone, a phone purchased with the same credit card that just paid Remington. You have no proof, Milena said weakly. Actually, Skylar stepped forward, I do. I found the receipt in your desk, along with a draft of the complaint, in your handwriting. The crowd gasped. Someone muttered, That's criminal! That's not even the worst part, I continued. Tell them about the school incident, Remington. Remington cleared her throat. During our planning meetings, Milena bragged about how she'd tried to get Violet transferred to a different school. She said she'd told the administration that Jordan was mentally unstable, that she was worried about her grandchildren's safety. Mum, Violet's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Is that why Miss Patterson kept asking me if I was scared at home? The room collectively held its breath. Milena took a step toward her granddaughter, but Violet backed away. Darling, I was only trying to protect you. By lying about my mother? Violet's voice cracked. By trying to take me away from her? Ivan returned, his face dark with fury. I just faxed copies of everything to our lawyer. He turned to his mother. How could you? My children, my wife. Everything I did was for this family. Milena's composure finally shattered. That woman isn't good enough for you. She never was. I had to protect our legacy, our status. By destroying your son's marriage, Skylar interrupted. By traumatizing your grandchildren. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Ivan cut in. You couldn't control Jordan like you control everyone else. So you tried to destroy her instead. Ricardo stepped forward, phone in hand. The foundation board is meeting tomorrow morning. They want all financial records for the past 5 years. You can't, Milena started. We can and we will, Ricardo said firmly. The missing donations, the fake charity events, the embezzlement, it's all coming out, Milena. The crowd had begun to thin, society wives slipping away to make urgent phone calls, spreading the scandal across their networks. Milena watched them go, her carefully curated social circle dissolving before her eyes. "Skylar," she pleaded, turning to her daughter, "you can't let them do this. I'm your mother." "You're a manipulator," Skylar replied quietly, "and I'm done being manipulated." I stood up, gathering my envelope. "The police will probably want to talk to you about the forged documents, the foundation board about the missing money, the school board about the false reports." I smiled sadly. "You've been very busy, Milena." "I'll deny everything," she hissed. "With what evidence?" Remington asked. "I have videos of you planning everything, time-stamped, dated, with clear audio of you admitting to all of it." Milena's legs gave out. She sank into a chair, her perfect posture crumpling. "Ivan," she whispered. "My son!" But Ivan was holding Violet, wiping her tears, murmuring comfort to his daughter. He didn't even look at his mother. "Mrs. Gonzalez," one of the hotel staff, approached nervously. "There are some reporters in the lobby. They're asking about a scandal at the anniversary party." Of course, in this age of social media, news travelled fast. The videos were probably already online. "Tell them no comment," I said firmly. "This is a private family matter." "A family you've destroyed," Milena spat. "No, Milena, you destroyed it. I'm just exposing the ruins." The remaining guests were leaving now, their whispers echoing off the marble floors. Stella touched my arm gently. "You okay?" I nodded, watching Skylar collect her mother's designer purse, phone and car keys. "The car service will take you home," Skylar told Milena. "Tomorrow we'll discuss arrangements for you to move out of the family house." "You can't evict me. The house is in Ivan's name," I reminded her. "Another detail you forgot to control." Milena stood shakily, her red dress now wrinkled, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. She looked at each of us in turn, Ivan, Skylar, Violet, me, searching for any crack in our united front. Finding none, she turned and walked toward the door, her heels no longer clicking with authority, but scraping like surrender against the floor. "Jordan," she said at the doorway, not turning around, "you'll regret this." "No," I replied softly. "I really won't." The ballroom doors closed behind her with a final heavy thud. The aftermath hit like a tidal wave. By morning, my phone had exploded with messages and local news vans circled our neighbourhood like vultures. I sat at our kitchen island, scrolling through the chaos while Ivan paced. "The foundation board just voted," Ricardo said through speakerphone. "Milena's been removed. They're launching a full audit." "How bad is it?" Ivan asked, running his hands through his hair for the 100th time. "Bad. We're talking hundreds of thousands in misappropriated funds. She used charity money to pay for everything, her cars, her vacations, even Violet's private school tuition." I watched my husband absorb another blow. "She used stolen money to pay for our daughter's education, while telling everyone you couldn't afford it on your own," Skylar added, walking in through the back door. She dropped a stack of files on the counter. "Found these in her home office, bank statements, offshore accounts, everything. How did none of us see this?" Ivan slumped into a chair. "Because she was careful," I said softly. "Until she wasn't, pride made her sloppy." My phone buzzed with a text from Stella. "Turn on channel 4, now." I grabbed the remote and flicked on the kitchen TV. Remington's face filled the screen, speaking to a reporter outside her apartment. Felt horrible about participating in the scheme. Mrs. Gonzalez Sr. promised me it was just a harmless prank, but when I realized the extent of her plans... "Turn it off," Ivan groaned. "No," Skylar said firmly. "We need to know what's out there." The doorbell rang. Through the front windows I could see more reporters gathering. "Back door," I told Ricardo. "Come through the garden." He arrived minutes later, carrying his laptop. "The Foundation's legal team wants to meet. They're talking criminal charges." "What about the will?" Skylar asked. "The forged documents." "That's different lawyers, same result. They're building a case." Ivan stood abruptly. "I need some air." "Ivan," I started. "Just give me a minute, Jordan, please." He disappeared into the backyard. Through the window, I watched him sit heavily on the garden bench, where we used to read stories to Violet. "He'll come around," Skylar squeezed my hand. "He has to process this." My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Hello?" "You think you're so clever," Milena's voice rough with rage. "You have no idea what you've started." I put the phone on speaker. "Actually, I do. That's why I recorded every threatening call you've made since last night. Listen carefully, you vindictive little—" "No, you listen," I cut in. "Every call, every text, every move you make now will be documented. The police are already involved. The media is watching. Your power is gone, Milena." "I still have friends." "Check your social feeds," Skylar called out. "No one's returning your calls, are they, Mother? No one's defending you." Silence on the line. "The country club called," I continued. "They're revoking your membership. The hospital board wants your resignation. Your bridge club has uninvited you to the charity gala. You've destroyed everything I built. You destroyed it yourself. I just provided the evidence." The line went dead. Ricardo whistled low. "That was intense." "Speaking of evidence," Skylar pulled out her phone. "You should see what I found in her safe." She played a video of Milena in her office, carefully copying signatures from old documents onto new ones. "Date stamp is from right after Dad died," she explained, "when she changed the will." The back door opened. Ivan stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long have you all been investigating my mother?" "I started 3 years ago, after the CPS report," I admitted. "Skylar joined last year when she found the original will. Ricardo figured it out 2 months ago." "And you never told me. Would you have believed us?" Skylar asked gently. "Really?" He sat down heavily. "No, God help me, I wouldn't have." "That's why we needed proof," I said. "Concrete, undeniable evidence, not just of one incident, but of years of manipulation and crimes. The kids—" He looked up suddenly. "Where are they?" "With Stella," I assured him. "Away from the media circus." His phone chimed. He looked at it and laughed hollowly. "The golf club. They want me to pass along their request for Mother's resignation. It's going to keep happening," Ricardo warned. "Every organization, every social circle." "Good," Ivan said with sudden firmness. "Let it all come down. No more lies, no more manipulation." He looked at me. "No more protecting her." I reached for his hand across the counter. After a moment's hesitation, he took it. "What now?" Skylar asked quietly. "Now," I said. "We let the truth do its work." Outside, another news van pulled up. The story was growing, and somewhere across town, in her empty mansion, Milena was watching her empire crumble. The war was over. The clean-up was just beginning. A week after the party, Ivan moved out. He didn't make a scene about it, just packed a small suitcase and said he needed time to think. "The kids should stay with you," he said, standing in our driveway. "They need stability right now." I nodded, watching him load his laptop bag into his car. "Where will you go?" "Ricardo's guest house, just for a while." The media frenzy had died down, but the aftershocks kept coming. Every day brought new revelations, new consequences. The Foundation's audit uncovered more missing money. The police investigation expanded. Milena's social circles scattered like leaves in a storm. "Mom?" Violet appeared in the doorway, watching her father's car disappear down the street. "Is Dad coming back?" I pulled her close. "He just needs some time, baby." "Because of what Grandma did?" "Because sometimes truth is harder than lies." Inside, my phone was ringing again. Skylar's name flashed on the screen. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "Mother's trying to sell the house." "She can't. It's in Ivan's name." "She forged the paperwork. Again. The realtor just called me to verify some details and the signatures looked wrong." I rubbed my temples. "Have you called the police?" "Already done. They're adding it to the investigation." Later that evening, Stella came over with pizza and wine. We sat on my back porch watching Violet and her brother play in the yard. Ivan called me today, Stella said carefully. And he's a mess. Keeps saying he should have seen it, should have protected you and the kids. I took a long sip of wine. He couldn't see it. She made sure of that. Speaking of seeing things, Stella pulled out her phone. Someone sent me this. It was a photo of Milena looking decidedly Milena-like, arguing with a security guard outside her country club. Her perfect hair was dishevelled, her designer outfit replaced by wrinkled casual wear. They're saying she tried to get in through the service entrance, Stella explained. When they stopped her, she started screaming about owning half the club. The mighty fall hard, I murmured. My phone buzzed with a text from Ricardo. Board meeting tomorrow. They found more accounts. Mom? My son called from the yard. Can we have ice cream? After dinner, buddy. Watching them play, I felt a strange mix of victory and sadness. We'd won, but at what cost? The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Remington standing there, looking nervous. I'm sorry to just show up, she said quickly. But I thought you should know. Your mother-in-law came to the cafe today. I ushered her inside. What happened? She offered me money, more money. Said if I retracted my statement, claimed you coerced me. Did you record it? Remington nodded. Like you taught me, every word. Good girl. There's more, she hesitated. She was talking to herself a lot, about revenge, about making things right. She seemed unstable. I shared a look with Stella. I'll call Ivan. But before I could, my phone lit up with his name. Jordan! His voice was tight. Mother just showed up at Ricardo's. She's demanding to see me. She's not well. Define not well. Crying, screaming about conspiracy. Ricardo's wife called the police. I could hear sirens in the background. The kids, I said immediately. I need to get the kids inside. I'm on my way home, he said, then caught himself. I mean, I'm coming over. We hung up. I called the children in, locked the doors, closed the blinds. Why are we hiding? Violet asked, too perceptive for her age. We're not hiding, sweetie. We're just being careful. Stella's phone chimed. She showed me the screen. A local news tweet. Socialite Milena Gonzalez detained after disturbance. Sources say psychiatric evaluation pending. It was bound to happen, Stella said softly. Her whole world collapsed. We heard Ivan's car pull up. He rushed in, looking wild-eyed. They took her to the hospital, he said. She kept saying she'd make us all pay, that we'd regret betraying her. The kids ran to him and he hugged them tight. Over their heads his eyes met mine. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you sooner. You believe me now, I said. That's what matters. Remington quietly excused herself. Stella followed, leaving us alone as a family. Is Grandma sick? My son asked. Ivan looked at me helplessly. Sometimes, I said carefully, when people lose everything they thought was important, they forget what really matters. Like family? Violet asked. Like family, I confirmed. Outside, another police car cruised by slowly, keeping watch. Inside, we held each other, a broken family trying to heal. The truth had set us free, but freedom, I was learning, came with its own kind of pain. The psychiatric hospital was quiet, except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Ivan and I sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs while a doctor explained Milena's condition. Your mother is experiencing what we call a narcissistic breakdown, he said, flipping through his notes. The loss of her social status, her control, it's triggered a severe psychological crisis. Will she recover? Ivan asked, with treatment, but she'll need to stay here for a while. As we left the consultation room, Skylar was waiting in the hallway, holding a manila envelope. They found this in her bedroom, she said quietly. You need to see it. Inside was a detailed plan, written in Milena's precise handwriting. Not just for the anniversary party scandal, but for something much worse. She was going to claim I was abusing the kids, I whispered, reading the notes. She had fake photos, doctored medical records. She was planning to get full custody. Ivan snatched the papers, his face darkening as he read. Medical records showing suspicious injuries, witness statements, school reports. He looked up, horror in his eyes. She was going to destroy you completely. The police want to add this to their investigation, Skylar said. They're talking serious charges now. Conspiracy, fraud, attempted kidnapping. A nurse approached us. Mrs. Gonzalez is asking for her son. Ivan hesitated, looking at me. Go, I said softly. You need this. He disappeared down the hallway. Through the window of Milena's room I could see her sitting in a chair, looking small without her designer clothes and perfect makeup. Skylar touched my arm. There's more. The foundation audit found something about Dad's death. My blood ran cold. What about it? She changed his medication schedule. The week before he died, Skylar's voice broke. She made sure he wasn't getting his heart medicine regularly. The nurse's logs were altered. Oh my God. She wanted control of the estate sooner. She knew if Dad lived another year, he'd discover the missing money. The door to Milena's room burst open. Ivan stormed out, his face ashen. She confessed, he said hoarsely, to everything. The money, the fraud, the CPS reports. She said she did it all for me, to protect me from, he looked at me, from making the wrong choice in life. A scream echoed from the room. Nurses rushed past us. Get out! Milena's voice carried through the halls. All of you traitors, you ungrateful children, I gave you everything. No, Mother, Skylar called back. You took everything, and now you've lost it all. We left as security arrived to sedate her. In the parking lot, Ivan grabbed my arm. Did you know, he demanded, about Dad's medication? No, I said honestly. That's new information. He leaned against his car, looking suddenly old. All these years, every time you tried to tell me something was wrong, I defended her. Even when she hurt you, hurt our children. You were conditioned to protect her, Skylar said gently. We all were. My phone buzzed. Ricardo with an update. The Foundation's pressing charges, I reported. They've frozen all her accounts. The house is being seized as evidence. Where will she go when they release her? Skylar wondered. Not near our family, Ivan said firmly. Never again. The drive home was silent. Ivan had moved back in 3 days ago, sleeping in the guest room while we tried to rebuild trust. The kids were with Stella again. She'd become our rock through all this. At home, we found an unmarked envelope in the mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typed text. Your revenge is admirable, but how much more do you want to ruin? Some secrets should stay buried. Back off now, or the next revelation might hurt more than just Milena. There's more? Ivan asked, voice cracking. There's always more, Skylar said tiredly. Mother's been manipulating people for decades. I took the note to my office, adding it to my evidence file. On my desk sat a framed photo from my wedding day. Everyone smiling, Milena standing proudly beside her son, me glowing in white. All lies. What do we do now? Ivan asked from the doorway. We keep digging, I said firmly. Whatever's left to find, whoever sent this note, we face it together. He nodded slowly. Together. My phone chimed with a text from Violet. Can we come home now? Aunt Stella's running out of ice cream. Get the kids, I told Ivan. They need their father. As he left, I stared at the threatening note. Someone else was out there, someone protecting old secrets, but they didn't understand. I'd learned from the best how to play the long game. Milena taught me well, even if she never meant to, and I wasn't done learning. The anonymous note led us to more than its sender intended. Following the paper trail, we discovered a network of Milena's enablers, business partners, social friends, even family members who'd helped her maintain her web of lies for decades. "Look at this," Skylar said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. Father's business partner knew about the medication tampering. He helped cover it up. "In exchange for what?" Ivan asked, poring over bank statements. "Silence about his own fraudulent dealings," Ricardo answered, joining us with his laptop. "Your mother had dirt on everyone. It's how she kept her power." The doorbell rang. Stella led in a parade of familiar faces. Former Foundation board members, country club associates, all carrying folders and guilty expressions. "We want to come clean," one woman said, setting down a thick binder, "about everything we helped Milena hide. The revelations poured out like poison from an old wound. Financial schemes, social manipulations, destroyed reputations. Milena's influence had reached further than any of us imagined." "Mom?" Violet appeared in the doorway. "There's a lady crying on our porch." I went to investigate and found Remington clutching more papers. "I remembered something else," she said shakily. "About the night Milena hired me. There was another woman there. She mentioned having done this before, playing other roles in Milena's schemes." "Get in here," I said, pulling her inside. "Tell them everything." The story unfolded like a dark tapestry. Milena had orchestrated similar scandals before, destroying business rivals, social competitors, anyone who threatened her position. The other actress was found, more evidence collected. My phone buzzed. The police detective handling Milena's case. "We're adding conspiracy charges," he said, "and we've identified the source of that threatening note. One of her old society friends trying to protect herself. We're bringing her in now." Ivan watched me end the call. "Is it ever going to stop? The revelations?" "It stops when we say it stops," I replied. "When every lie is exposed, every victim vindicated." "Speaking of vindication," Skylar called from my office, "the Foundation's lawyers are here." The next hours blurred with legal discussions, statements, signatures. The Foundation was suing Milena and her conspirators. The police were expanding their investigation. The hospital was extending Milena's psychiatric hold. "I need air," I announced, stepping onto the back porch. Ivan followed. "Remember when we first bought this house? Mother said it wasn't good enough. Nothing ever was." "No," he took my hand. "You are. I was the one who wasn't good enough, not strong enough to see the truth, to protect you." Inside, I could hear Violet playing piano, the instrument Milena had insisted she learn, now becoming something she genuinely loved. "We're not staying victims," I said firmly. "We're building something new. Together? If you're ready to choose your family over her control." He squeezed my hand. "I already have." The back door opened. Ricardo emerged with more papers. "Final piece of the puzzle," he said. "We found Milena's private diary. She documented everything, every scheme, every manipulation. It's like a roadmap of destruction." "Why would she write it all down?" Ivan wondered. "Because she was proud of it," Skylar said from the doorway. "It was her masterpiece." "No," I corrected. "Her masterpiece was creating a family that finally stood up to her." My phone chimed with a news alert. "Socialite scandal expands. Dozens implicated in decades-long web of fraud." "Mom!" Violet called. "Can we have pizza? All these lawyers are making me hungry." I laughed, the first real laugh in weeks. "Yes, baby, pizza for everyone." The sun was setting as our unexpected gathering shared food and truth. Former victims became allies, old secrets lost their power in the telling. Even the lawyers relaxed, sharing stories of other family dynasties toppled by their own corruption. "What happens now?" Stella asked quietly. "Now." I looked around at our transformed living room, no longer a showcase for Milena's control, but a war room for justice. Now we rebuild. Not just our family, but everything she broke. "The Foundation wants you on the board," Ricardo mentioned. "Both of you, actually." He nodded to Ivan and me. "And the country club," Ivan asked Riley. Please, Skylar snorted. We can start our own club, one without secret handshakes and hidden agendas. Violet played another piece on the piano, something bright and hopeful. My son was teaching the lawyer's kids to play video games. The house felt alive, real, ours. I caught Ivan's eye across the room. He smiled, not his public smile, but something genuine and a little broken and perfectly true. Thank you, he mouthed. For what? For burning it all down, and for helping us rise from the ashes. Outside, another news van drove by slowly. Inside, we had everything we needed: truth, family, pizza, and the strength to face whatever came next. Some fires cleanse, some destructions heal, and sometimes the only way forward is through the flames.
It was another day in what had become a monotonous routine. I sat at the kitchen table, absently swirling a spoon in my half-drunk cup of coffee. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound accompanying me. My baby, barely 6 months old, slept soundly in the next room. I could hear the gentle rise and fall of his breathing on the baby monitor. He was my only anchor, my tiny beacon of light in a world that had grown increasingly dark. David, my husband, was upstairs packing for a trip to visit his parents. A trip I had no desire to take. The thought of being stuck in a car with him for hours, pretending we were a happy family, filled me with dread. Things between us had been tense for months. His dismissive attitude, his temper, and his complete lack of empathy had turned our marriage into a battlefield where I felt outnumbered and unarmed. I glanced at the calendar on the wall, the date circled in red, family visit. My stomach churned at the sight. I wanted to call it off, to tell David I wasn't feeling well, but I knew how he'd react. He'd accuse me of being selfish, of trying to ruin his plans. Just go along with it, I whispered to myself, though my heart screamed in protest. Lisa, are you packed yet? David's voice thundered down the stairs, sharp and impatient. I took a deep breath before answering. I'm not sure I should go, David. I'm feeling a bit off today. There was a pause before his footsteps pounded down the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of frustration. You're always feeling off. You'll be fine. Just rest in the car if you're tired. I tried to muster a response, but his dismissive tone cut me off before I could even start. He strode past me, grabbed my half-packed bag from the corner, and shoved it toward me. Come on, we're already running late. Reluctantly, I followed him to the car. As I settled into the passenger seat, I couldn't shake the gnawing unease in my chest. Something about today felt wrong. We were barely out of the driveway when it happened. A sharp, unmistakable gush of warmth spread down my legs. For a moment, I was frozen, trying to process what was happening. Then it hit me, my water had broken. David, I gasped, my water just broke. We need to go to the hospital, now. He slammed on the brakes, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. Are you serious? Now? Yes, now, I snapped, panic rising in my voice. The baby's coming. Instead of springing into action, David muttered something under his breath, grabbed a towel from the back seat, and threw it at me. Clean it up, he said, his voice flat. Clean it up? I echoed in disbelief. David, this is serious, we have to go. He cut me off, throwing open his door and walking around to mine. Before I could comprehend what was happening, he yanked the passenger door open and barked. Get out. What? My voice cracked. Get out of the car, he yelled. You're going to ruin the seats. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled out of the car, clutching my belly. How could you do this? I'm your wife. And I'm having your child. He glared at me, his face twisted in annoyance. This isn't my fault. Lisa, you should have planned this better. Call an ambulance or something. And with that, he got back into the car, slammed the door, and drove away, leaving me alone on the side of the road. I stood there, stunned and trembling, watching the taillights disappear down the road. My phone felt like a lifeline in my pocket as I dialed for an ambulance, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. Before the operator could answer, a voice called out behind me. Lisa, are you okay? I turned to see Sarah, my neighbor, rushing toward me. She'd always been kind, but we'd never been particularly close. Yet in that moment, she looked like an angel sent to save me. My water broke. I managed to choke out between sobs. David, he left me here. Her face darkened with shock and fury, but her voice remained calm. We need to get you to the hospital. Come on. She helped me into her car, her movements careful but decisive. As she drove, she held my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "You're going to be okay," she said softly, "I promise." When we arrived at the hospital, Sarah didn't leave my side. She stayed with me through the paperwork, through the hurried footsteps of nurses, and even as I was wheeled into a room, her presence was a steady comfort, like a lighthouse guiding me through the storm. My parents arrived not long after, their faces etched with worry. Sarah pulled them aside to explain what had happened, her voice low but firm. I watched from my hospital bed, my heart swelling with gratitude. This woman, who owed me nothing, had done more for me in a single day than David had in months. As the labor pains intensified, I made a silent vow. David would pay for what he'd done, not out of spite, but to protect my baby and myself. I wouldn't let him drag us down any longer. When I finally heard my baby's cries, relief and joy washed over me. I held him close, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine, and felt a surge of love stronger than anything I'd ever known. This was the beginning of a new chapter, and I was determined to write it on my own terms. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft whimpers of my newborn nestled in my arms. The exhaustion from labor weighed heavily on me, but I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of David, his callousness, his abandonment, and the cold, heartless way he had left me on the side of the road. I stared at the baby, his tiny fingers curling and uncurling as he drifted in and out of sleep. A deep sadness filled my chest, but there was also something else, resolve. He deserved better than the chaos David would bring into our lives, and so did I. The door creaked open, and Sarah peeked her head in, carrying a cup of tea. "How's my favorite little family?" she whispered, smiling warmly. I managed a weak smile. "We're okay, thanks to you." She set the tea down and pulled up a chair beside me. "Lisa, I've been thinking, you can't go back to him, not after this." I looked away, her words cutting too close to the truth. "I don't know where to start, Sarah, I don't even have a plan." "Start by knowing your worth," she said firmly. "You're stronger than you think." Later that afternoon, as I rested with the baby, the sound of raised voices outside my hospital room jolted me awake. My heart sank. I recognized David's voice. He barged in moments later, his expression unreadable. "Lisa," he began, his eyes darting between me and the baby, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I said, my voice sharp and unforgiving. "I think you said everything you needed to when you left me on the side of the road." David flinched, but quickly regained his composure. I panicked. "Okay, I made a mistake, but I'm here now. Let's just move past it." I stared at him in disbelief. "Move past it? David, you abandoned me during labor. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? What if something had happened to me or the baby?" He sighed, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Lisa, you're blowing this out of proportion. I came to see my son, didn't I? Doesn't that count for something?" His son, not our son. The words stung, but they also clarified something for me. David didn't see us as a family, he saw us as obligations, burdens to be managed. I realized then that I couldn't stay in this marriage, not for another day. "You need to leave," I said firmly, my voice trembling but resolute. "What?" He blinked, caught off guard. "You're kicking me out of the hospital?" "Yes," I said, my grip tightening around my baby. "I don't want you here." For a moment, I thought he might argue, but he simply shrugged. "Fine, have it your way." As he stormed out, I felt a wave of relief mixed with a lingering sense of fear. I had stood up to him, but I knew this was only the beginning. The next few days were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and overwhelming exhaustion. My parents stayed with me at the hospital, their quiet support a balm to my frayed nerves. They hadn't said much about David, but I could see the concern in their eyes. On the day of my discharge, my father pulled me aside. "Lisa," he said gently, "we're proud of you for standing up to David, but what's your plan now?" I hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on me. "I'm going to file for separation," I said finally. "I can't go back to him, not after what he did." My father nodded, his expression both relieved and worried. "You know we're here for you, right? Whatever you need." Their support gave me strength, but I knew this was a battle I'd have to fight on my own. Returning to the house I had shared with David was out of the question. Instead, I moved in with my parents temporarily, setting up a nursery in the room I had grown up in. As I settled into this new phase of life, I started reaching out to lawyers and support groups. It was terrifying, but it was also empowering. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. The weeks that followed were both challenging and rewarding. Every day was a balancing act, caring for my baby, managing my emotions, and navigating the legalities of separating from David. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of pure joy. Like the first time my baby smiled at me, or the way he curled into my arms when he was sleepy. Sarah visited often, bringing meals and words of encouragement. "You're doing great," she said one afternoon as she rocked the baby to sleep. "I hope you know that." "I don't feel great," I admitted. "Some days, I don't even feel like myself." "That's normal," she said, "but you're stronger than you think. You've already come so far." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. Just when I thought I was finding my footing, David reappeared, this time with demands. He showed up at my parents' house one evening, his face a mixture of anger and desperation. "You can't just take my son away from me," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I have rights." "No one's stopping you from being a father," I said, keeping my voice calm, "but you don't get to control me anymore." His eyes narrowed. "You think you're better off without me? You're nothing without me, Lisa." The words stung, but they didn't break me. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "I'm everything without you." I shut the door in his face, my hands trembling. I knew this wasn't the end of his threats, but I also knew I wasn't the same scared, dependent woman he had once controlled. That night, as I held my baby close, I made a promise to him and to myself. I would fight for our future, no matter how difficult it was. I wouldn't let David's anger or manipulation dictate our lives. I began documenting everything, every interaction with David, every threat he made. My lawyer had advised me to keep detailed records, and I was determined to be prepared for whatever came next. At the same time, I leaned on the people who cared about me. My parents, Sarah, and the support group I had joined became my lifeline, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this battle. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild. Each small victory, a peaceful day, a milestone with the baby, was a step forward, and with every step, I felt my confidence grow. Life with my baby, whom I'd named Oliver, was a mix of exhaustion and wonder. Every coup, every tiny milestone, felt like a victory, a reminder of the life I was building for us. My days were consumed by caring for him, attending parenting classes, and working with my lawyer to navigate the separation. I was trying to create a semblance of normalcy, but David's shadow loomed large. He began calling incessantly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic pleas to angry outbursts. I ignored most of them, forwarding anything threatening to my lawyer. One morning, as I sat in the living room feeding Oliver, my phone buzzed with another message from David. This one was different. "Lisa, I'm done playing nice. If you don't let me see my son, I'll make your life hell. You've been warned." The words sent a shiver down my spine. My lawyer assured me I was doing everything right, but David's unpredictability was a constant source of anxiety. One afternoon, during my first tentative visit back to the office, David showed up unannounced. He was waiting by the building entrance, his face twisted with frustration. "David, you can't be here," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fear bubbling in my chest. "You're avoiding me," he accused. "You won't take my calls, and now you're keeping me from my son." "I'm not avoiding you," I said, stepping back as he moved closer. "I'm protecting Oliver. You abandoned us, David. You can't just show up and demand access." His voice rose, drawing the attention of a few coworkers. "He's my son too, Lisa. You don't get to make all the decisions." "Then take it to court," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "But stop harassing me." Before he could respond, security arrived, escorting him off the premises. The humiliation on his face was evident, but I didn't feel triumphant. If anything, I felt more trapped than ever. After the incident at work, my lawyer advised me to file for a restraining order. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Despite everything, part of me wanted to believe David could change, that he could be a better father than he had been a husband. But the threats, the unpredictable behavior, and the scene at my workplace left me with little choice. I had to prioritize Oliver's safety and my own. The court hearing was a nerve-wracking experience. David showed up with his lawyer, looking polished and composed, a stark contrast to the volatile man I knew. He painted himself as a devoted father, a man who had made mistakes but deserved a chance to be in his son's life. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out the facts, the abandonment during labor, the threats, the harassment. My lawyer presented the voicemails and documented incidents, painting a clear picture of David's behavior. The judge granted the restraining order, restricting David's contact with me and allowing supervised visits with Oliver. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step forward. With the restraining order in place, a sense of relief settled over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Oliver and I fell into a new rhythm, surrounded by love and support from my family and friends. One evening, Sarah invited me to a small gathering at her house. It was a chance to unwind, to remember that I was more than just a mother navigating a messy separation. Among the guests was Daniel, a mutual friend of Sarah's. He was kind, with an easy smile and a warmth that felt disarming. We struck up a conversation, sharing stories about work and life. For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made my chest feel lighter. As the night went on, I found myself drawn to him. There was no pressure, no expectations, just a simple connection that felt refreshing. The peace didn't last long. A week after the gathering at Sarah's, I received a letter from David's lawyer. He was contesting the custody arrangements, seeking joint custody of Oliver. The thought of sharing parenting responsibilities with David was unbearable. "He's trying to get back at me," I told my lawyer during a tense meeting. "This isn't about Oliver, it's about control." "I believe you," she said, "but we need to focus on the evidence. If we can prove that joint custody isn't in Oliver's best interest, the court will side with you." The thought of another legal battle was exhausting, but I knew I couldn't back down. Oliver deserved stability, not the chaos David would bring into his life. The weeks leading up to the custody hearing were some of the hardest I'd faced. David's legal team dug into every aspect of my life, trying to paint me as an unfit mother. They questioned my decision to live with my parents, my ability to balance work and motherhood, even my brief interaction with Daniel. Through it all, I held on to the support of the people around me, my parents, Sarah, and even Daniel, who had become a steady presence in my life, reminded me that I wasn't alone in this fight. The hearing was tense and emotional. Both sides presented their arguments, but in the end, the court ruled in my favor. David was granted limited visitation, supervised by a court-appointed monitor. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough. After the hearing, I sat in the car with my lawyer, tears streaming down my face. They were a mix of relief, exhaustion, and gratitude. The fight wasn't over, there would always be challenges, but I had proven to myself that I could stand up for Oliver and for me. When I got home that evening, I found Daniel waiting on the porch. He didn't say much, just pulled me into a hug that felt like home. "You're amazing, you know that?" he said softly. "Oliver's lucky to have you." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. The days following the custody ruling brought a rare stillness to my life. The weight of the legal battle lifted, leaving space for me to reflect on everything that had transpired. I spent hours with Oliver, marveling at the tiny miracles of his growth, his first tooth, the way he reached for me when he needed comfort, the small giggles that seemed to erase the darkest days. He was my reason for everything, my light in every storm. David's supervised visits began soon after. I felt a pang of anxiety each time I handed Oliver over to the court-appointed monitor, but the arrangement offered me a sense of control. I knew Oliver would be safe, and that was enough. One evening, as I rocked Oliver to sleep, I thought about the person I had been before all this, a young woman brimming with dreams, but uncertain of her strength. Life had tested me in ways I never expected, but I'd emerged stronger, more sure of who I was and what I deserved. My friendship with Daniel continued to blossom. He wasn't just a source of support, he became someone I looked forward to seeing, someone who reminded me that joy still existed, even in the aftermath of chaos. One Saturday, he invited me and Oliver to a park. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of day that made the world feel brighter. Daniel brought a blanket and a basket of snacks, and we spent hours under the shade of a tree, talking and laughing while Oliver napped in my arms. "You've been through so much," Daniel said, his voice gentle, "but you're still standing. That's incredible." "I didn't have a choice," I said. "Oliver needed me." He smiled, his gaze warm. "And you've been there for him every step of the way. But you deserve happiness too, Lisa." His words stayed with me long after we left the park. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't just about survival, a future that included love and laughter. David's visits were uneventful at first, but over time, he began to change. He started sending small gifts for Oliver, leaving notes apologizing for his past behavior. I remained wary, but I couldn't ignore the effort he was making. One afternoon, after a particularly peaceful visit, David asked to speak with me. "I know I've been a terrible husband and father," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to be better for Oliver." His words stirred a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe him, to hold on to the hope that he could change, but another part of me remembered the pain he'd caused, the sleepless nights, and the fear. "I appreciate the effort you're making," I said carefully, "but trust takes time. If you're serious about being there for Oliver, prove it with your actions." It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a step toward understanding, a fragile bridge between the past and the future. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. David continued his supervised visits, slowly earning the court's trust, while our relationship remained distant. We found a way to co-parent with civility. Meanwhile, my bond with Daniel deepened. He wasn't just a friend anymore, he was someone I could lean on, someone who made me feel safe. One evening, after putting Oliver to bed, Daniel stayed for dinner. As we sat on the couch, talking about everything and nothing, he reached for my hand. "Lisa," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I know you've been through so much. I don't want to rush anything, but I care about you, I care about Oliver, and I want to be here for both of you, if you'll let me." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. "I'd like that," I whispered. It wasn't a grand declaration or a sweeping romance, it was quiet and real, built on trust and understanding. On Oliver's first birthday, I threw a small party at my parents' house. It was a celebration of not just his life, but everything we'd overcome together. Friends and family gathered in the backyard, showering Oliver with love and laughter. David showed up briefly, bringing a small, thoughtful gift for Oliver, a handmade photo album filled with pictures of their visits. He stayed just long enough to share a moment with his son before quietly leaving, giving me a small nod of acknowledgement as he went. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was enough. David was trying, and that mattered. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I stood in the quiet house, holding Oliver as he drifted off to sleep. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the heartbreak, the challenges, the unexpected moments of grace. I wasn't the same person I'd been a year ago. I was stronger, more resilient, and more certain of my worth. Life hadn't unfolded the way I'd imagined, but in its messiness and beauty, it had given me everything I needed. As I put Oliver in his crib and turned off the light, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew I could handle it. I had my son, my family, and the beginnings of a new love. And for the first time, I felt truly free. Life in the urban sprawl as a police officer doesn't just toughen you, it encases you in a shell of skepticism so thick it might as well be Kevlar. That was me, Emma, a 37-year-old former lieutenant turned private detective. I carried a suitcase of mistrust heavier than the cases I cracked, my daily grind orbiting around unfaithful partners and the art of deception, hardly the backdrop for a romantic tale. Then Bobby strolled into my life, a beacon of modern artistry, refreshing my world like a vibrant brushstroke on a faded mural. We crossed paths at an art exhibition in Philadelphia, surrounded by enthusiasts tossing around terms like postmodern and avant-garde with effortless poise. I, however, felt as out of place as a fish trying to pedal a bicycle. "Intriguing piece, isn't it?" Bobby said, his gaze fixed on what looked like a strategically arranged heap of junk. "If by intriguing, you mean I've seen tidier trash heaps, then absolutely," I quipped. His laugh, deep and resonant, turned heads. That laugh, and the man it belonged to, swept me into a whirlwind romance. Fast forward 7 months, and I was utterly smitten. Bobby was a dapper gentleman who seemed plucked from a bygone era, charming me with poetry readings, exquisite art shows, and an attention that made me feel like the only woman alive. Beneath a starlit sky in Central Park, he proposed. My yes came without hesitation, my heart pounding with sheer joy. The engagement was blissful, a haze of love and daydreams about a future brimming with laughter, adventure, and maybe children, but as the saying goes, if something seems too good to be true. Enter Marilyn, Bobby's mother, the epitome of frostiness. She scrutinized me with the air of someone inspecting a blemish on fine china. "A detective? Isn't that a tad unladylike?" she asked during our first dinner together. "That depends on which century your ideals are anchored in," I replied, earning a tense smile from Bobby. Her visits grew more frequent, each one an audit of our burgeoning life together. 3 weeks into our marriage, she appeared unannounced one chilly Tuesday evening. Her disdain was as palpable as the cold outside. "Emma, darling," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "still clinging to that quaint little job of yours? I had hoped marriage would refine you into a proper lady." I was slicing vegetables for dinner, the knife suddenly tempting for uses beyond the culinary. "Marilyn, where I come from, we call this earning a living. You might try it sometime instead of leeching off others," I said, my voice steady. Her lips pursed, but she maintained her poised demeanor. Bobby was raised with certain expectations. "Emma, there's still time for you to choose a more respectable career. Something like full-time meddling?" I shot back, my tone sharp. Thanks, but I'll stick to tracking unfaithful spouses and deceivers. Speaking of which, how's your bridge club treating you? Bobby entered just then, his impeccable timing diffusing the tension, though his arrival didn't stop Marilyn's passive-aggressive commentary. Your wife has quite the flair for sharp remarks, she said sweetly. Mom, Bobby sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Emma's career is part of who she is. Can we not do this right now? I swallowed my irritation and turned back to the chopping board, letting the argument simmer with the vegetables. After Marilyn's visits, Bobby retreated into a shell of silence that I couldn't penetrate. It was painfully clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. One particularly tense evening, after Marilyn had criticized everything from my cooking to my housekeeping, I confronted him. Why don't you ever stand up for me? I demanded. Your mother treats me like I'm invisible, and you just let her. Is this what our marriage is supposed to be? Bobby looked weary. Emma, she's old-fashioned. What do you want me to do? Cut her off? No. I want you to support me, to tell her she can't bulldoze over us. Is that asking too much? He sighed, raking his fingers through his hair. I'll talk to her, okay? Just give it some time. She'll adjust. But she didn't. Neither did he. The distance between us grew, widened by Marilyn's coldness and Bobby's passivity, creating a chasm that felt impossible to bridge. Living with Bobby started to feel like being part of a melodrama, where the cracks in our perfect facade began to show. He worked at a prestigious art gallery, an impressive-sounding role until you considered how erratic his earnings were. Meanwhile, my detective work provided a comfortable lifestyle in a stylish apartment. One evening, as we discussed our future over dinner, I brought up the idea of eventually buying a house, envisioning the space we'd need if we planned to start a family. Bobby paused, his fork hovering midair, and looked at me quizzically. Emma, where are you getting these ideas? We don't need a house, and me finding a new job isn't on the agenda. I set my fork down, trying to maintain a calm tone. It's not about need, Bobby, it's about planning for our future. A stable income would certainly help. He chuckled, a sound that used to warm my heart but now grated against my patience. You and your fixation on money, he said lightly. You always focus on the financial bottom line, don't you? Money isn't everything, Emma. His laughter pushed me to the edge. It's easy for you to say when you're not the one stressed about paying the bills each month. I'm not fixated on money, Bobby. He shrugged dismissively and returned to his meal as if we were merely discussing the weather. I'm happy with our life as it is. You're the one who's never satisfied. I stood, my appetite gone. Maybe I wouldn't be so focused on money if you contributed more than just critiques about how I manage ours. He didn't even glance up. I contribute in other ways, Emma. Not everything is about money. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. This wasn't just about buying a house, planning for kids, or finances. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which Bobby seemed to value. As long as his life remained comfortable, he dismissed my concerns as an obsession with money, sidestepping the real issues between us. On a seemingly ordinary Sunday, our living room became an impromptu stage for high drama when Marilyn, my not-so-favorite mother-in-law, dropped by unannounced. The air grew tense as she remained glued to her phone, her voice wavering between panic and confusion. And you're telling me my social security number has been suspended? How much do I need to pay to fix this? Marilyn's voice cracked as she rummaged through her purse for her checkbook and documents. In the kitchen, coffee in hand, I overheard her mention social security and payments. Years of police work had sharpened my instincts, and alarm bells rang in my head. This was a scam. I hurried into the living room, my approach quiet but quick. Marilyn, hang up the phone. It's a scam, I interjected, my tone firm but calm. She turned to me, shocked and offended. I beg your pardon? I'm handling this, Emma. There's no need for your intrusion. Before she could protest further, I stepped forward and ended the call with a decisive click. Silence enveloped the room, thick with tension. Marilyn recoiled, her face twisting into an expression of fury and disbelief. How dare you? That was incredibly rude and uncalled for. Who do you think you are, treating me like some naive child? Bobby appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. His expression was a mix of concern and frustration. Emma, what's going on? Why are you upsetting my mother? I turned to him, my frustration mounting. That call was from scammers, Bobby. They were trying to con Marilyn out of her money by claiming her social security number was suspended. It's a common tactic. I've seen it 100 times. Bobby rubbed the back of his neck. a gesture I recognized as him feeling cornered. Okay, but couldn't you have been more diplomatic about it? Marilyn, gathering her belongings with shaking hands, shot me a look sharp enough to curdle milk. I don't need to be saved, especially not by someone who treats me with such disrespect. I'll speak to the bank about this so-called scam. She stormed out, leaving a chilly silence behind. Bobby sighed, his gaze shifting between the door and me. Emma, I know you meant well, but you have to handle things more gently, especially with my mother. I felt a twinge of guilt but stood my ground. I know it seemed harsh, but there wasn't time for polite exchanges. Scammers thrive on urgency, and any hesitation could have cost Marilyn dearly. The next day, still feeling a mix of curiosity and guilt, I decided to call her. After 3 rings, she picked up, her voice cold and measured. What do you want, Emma? I cleared my throat. I just wanted to check on you after yesterday. Did you speak with the bank about that call? There was a pause before she reluctantly admitted. Yes, I did. They confirmed it was a scam. Her tone hardened. But that doesn't excuse how you handled things. You were rude and aggressive. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. I'm sorry if I seemed harsh. I was just trying to protect you. These scammers are professional deceivers and very convincing. Her reply was curt, laced with begrudging gratitude. Well, I suppose I should thank you for stopping me from making a mistake, but don't think this changes my view of your methods or your demeanor. Goodbye, Emma. The tension between Bobby and me deepened, turning our home from a warm sanctuary into a chilly battlefield. Clinging to hope, I saw his upcoming birthday as an opportunity to rekindle the fading spark in our relationship. I meticulously planned a weekend getaway just for the two of us, dreaming of restoring what we once had. However, Marilyn bulldozed through my plans with her own, scheduling a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday, fully aware my work schedule was overflowing. I pleaded with her over the phone. Can't we push it to Saturday? I'm swamped at work. Her voice was a blend of syrup and frost. No, dear, this is when it's happening. Bobby shouldn't have to adjust his birthday to fit around your job. Frustration gnawed at me as I confided in my boss, a veteran of countless betrayals and deceptions. He understood the importance of gestures. Go, he urged, giving me a knowing look. Do what you need to do. Arriving at Marilyn's, the party was already in full swing, an ostentatious display of pretense. Marilyn spotted me immediately, her smile tightening as she whispered something to Bobby. There he was, my husband, ensconced by the fireplace, his arm casually draped around a woman who was more than just a colleague. My heart sank, but I steeled myself and approached them. Aren't you going to introduce me? I tried to keep my voice steady, though my emotions churned. Bobby, aren't you going to introduce me? He flinched, his eyes widening in shock. Emma, this is Lori, from the gallery, he muttered, glancing nervously at her before turning to me. And this is Emma, a relative. The words hit me like a slap. A relative? My voice rose before I could stop it. Your wife, Bobby, or have you conveniently forgotten? The room fell silent, the tension crackling like static electricity. Bobby's expression twisted, a mixture of embarrassment and irritation. You know, he snapped, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority. He turned away dismissively, his words cutting deeper than I thought possible. Before I could respond, Marilyn appeared, her voice dripping with disdain. You see, Emma, you just don't fit in here. Bobby needs someone supportive, like Lori, not, whatever this is. She gestured vaguely at me, her disdain unmistakable. Her next words were cold and biting. I think it's best if you leave. You're not wanted here. I stood frozen for a moment, Marilyn's venomous words echoing in my ears. Then, I straightened my spine and met her gaze with all the strength I could muster. You're right, Marilyn. I don't belong in a family built on lies and deception. With as much dignity as I could gather, I walked out, the chill of the night air wrapping around me like an unwelcome embrace. After the debacle of Bobby's birthday and the revelations that followed, I knew I needed undeniable proof to sever this marriage on my terms, but the idea of uncovering Bobby's betrayal myself was unbearable. I reached out to Alan, a trusted colleague with a knack for uncovering discreet affairs. Alan, I said, my voice barely steady, I need a favor. Anything for you, he replied without hesitation. What's going on? It's Bobby. I think he's seeing someone. I need evidence, I admitted, the words tasting bitter. Say no more, Alan assured me. I'll handle it discreetly. You'll have everything you need. He was true to his word. The evidence he gathered was damning. Photos, audio, And more, Lori wasn't just a fling, she was here illegally, seeking a quick marriage to secure her status. She and Bobby had even been involved in fraud. Part of me wanted to confront Bobby with the evidence, but I knew better. He didn't deserve my anger, my pain, or my time. Filing for divorce was painful but necessary, like tearing off a band-aid over a festering wound. I demanded financial compensation, just a fraction of what I had lost emotionally and financially during our marriage. Marilyn, ever the dragon lady, sided with Bobby, painting me as the villain, but armed with the evidence, I stood my ground. When the papers were signed, I felt an overwhelming sense of release. It wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new life. I poured my energy into opening my detective agency, turning my pain into purpose. The agency thrived quickly, building a reputation for discretion and effectiveness. It was a reflection of everything I'd learned, the lies, the betrayals, and the resilience I had cultivated. Every case was a small victory, a piece of myself healing as I helped others uncover their own truths. One morning, as I sifted through files, Alice, my right-hand woman, peeked into my office. "Boss, we've got a potential case. A woman suspects her husband is having an affair." I smiled, the irony not lost on me. "Sounds like our bread and butter. What's the catch?" "She's on a tight budget," Alice said. I thought for a moment. This was my chance to help someone like the person I used to be. "We'll work with her budget," I decided. "And Alice, let's make sure we're thorough. I know all too well what it's like to be on the other side of this." Life has a way of coming full circle. A week after Marilyn's surprise visit to my agency, my phone buzzed with a number I thought I'd erased. Seeing Bobby's name flash on the screen felt surreal. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Emma," he began, his voice carrying a blend of hope and desperation. "I've been thinking. I want us to start over, have kids, build a future together." I snorted, unable to hold back my disbelief. "Really? And where would we live in this fantasy of yours?" "With my mom, at first," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We'll save money, and then you can buy us a house. It'll be perfect." This time, I laughed, loud and unrestrained. "You really haven't changed, Bobby. You still think I exist to clean up your messes and fund your dreams." "Emma, please," he stammered. "I've changed. We can fix this." I paused, reflecting on the years I had wasted and the strength I had found since leaving him. Then, with a calm I hadn't known before, I said, "No, Bobby, you haven't changed. Goodbye." Hanging up felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd long since finished. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. As I returned to my work, I felt a surge of purpose. The past was behind me, and the future stretched out like a blank canvas, ready for me to paint with bold, vibrant strokes. Life's best revenge is living well, and I was fully committed to doing just that. The black dress feels wrong against my skin as I stand before my 7-year-old son's casket. Wrong because Nathan should be here, holding my hand, sharing this unbearable weight. Wrong because parents shouldn't outlive their children. And wrong, so profoundly wrong, because while I bury our son, my husband is in Hawaii with his mistress. I know this because a photo landed on my phone 10 minutes ago. Nathan, tan and grinning, a cocktail in hand, his arm draped around a blonde who can't be older than 30. Below it, the message read, "Thought you should see what your husband's really doing today. A concerned friend." My mother's hand tightens around my arm. "Gabrielle, you're shaking." She's right. The phone trembles in my grip until I shove it into my purse, its weight pressing against me like the judgmental eyes of the mourners around us. Whispers ripple through the small chapel, secrets spread fast in our town, and Nathan's glaring absence at his own son's funeral will fuel gossip for months. "I'll kill him," my mother mutters, her voice low and trembling with fury. "That bastard, I'll kill him with my bare hands." The small, white coffin gleams under the chapel lights, draped in a blanket of roses, Lucas's favorite. He loved how food coloring could transform their pale petals into vivid blues and purples. We spent hours in the hospital together, conducting experiments just to see him smile through the pain. Nathan's parents linger near the edge of the crowd, their expressions carefully neutral. Linda, my mother-in-law, meets my gaze briefly before turning away. She knows. She's probably always known. The funeral director approaches, clipboard in hand. "Are we ready to begin?" I want to scream that I'm not ready, that none of this is right. Lucas should be home playing video games, begging for 5 more minutes before bedtime. Instead, I nod and take my place in the front pew. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's a message from Nathan himself. Sorry I couldn't make it. Important business meeting. We'll make it up to you. A wave of rage washes over me, scorching away my grief for one fleeting moment and leaving behind something colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. I delete the message and sit up straighter. Let him enjoy his Hawaiian paradise with his cheap mistress. Let him think he's won, that I'll crumble under the weight of my grief like a dutiful, broken widow. He's wrong. I'm going to destroy him, not just for abandoning Lucas during his illness, not just for missing his funeral, but for every lie, every betrayal, every selfish moment when he put himself first. Piece by piece, I'll take everything from him until he understands what true loss feels like. The reception at my parents' house feels like a staged play, everyone performing their assigned roles. In the kitchen, Linda corners me, her manicured nails digging into my arm just a little too hard. Nathan's going through a difficult time, she says, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. We all process grief differently. I shake her off, focusing instead on arranging cookies that no one will eat onto a serving tray. Is that what we're calling it now? Processing grief in Hawaii? Her lips press into a thin line. You've always had a flair for dramatics, Gabrielle. Perhaps if you'd been more understanding during Lucas's illness. Don't you dare. My mother's voice slices through the room, sharp and unyielding. She steps into the doorway, and I've never seen her look so furious. Don't you dare blame my daughter for your son's cowardice. Linda stiffens, her composure slipping for the briefest moment. Margaret, this is hardly the time. It's exactly the time. My mother closes the distance between them, her smaller frame somehow towering over Linda's. While my daughter was sleeping in hospital chairs for months, where was Nathan? While my grandson fought for his life, where were you and Robert, with your family support? The sound of shattering porcelain interrupts her tirade. I've crushed a cookie in my fist, crumbs scattering across the counter. In the living room, my father asks a guest about his newspaper for the third time in 10 minutes, oblivious to the storm brewing in the kitchen. We contributed financially, Linda says stiffly, her voice laced with condescension, which is more than I can say for some people. My mother laughs, a cold, bitter sound. Oh yes, your precious money. Tell me, Linda, does Nathan know about the trust fund yet? The one Robert's father left specifically for his great-grandchildren? Linda's face goes pale. This is the first I'm hearing of any trust fund, but it's clear from her reaction that this information wasn't meant for me. That's a family matter, she hisses. Lucas was family, I say quietly, the pieces falling into place. He was the only great-grandchild, that money was his. The tension in the kitchen becomes suffocating as Linda's perfectly composed mask begins to crack, revealing something dark and calculating beneath. All those times she discouraged Nathan from spending time with Lucas. All those business trips she conveniently arranged during his hospital stays. It wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. I think you should leave, my mother says, her voice ice cold. But Linda's already retreating, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like tiny hammers driving nails into the foundation of my growing rage. I turn to my mother, my voice tight. Tell me everything about that trust fund. Her smile is grim, filled with years of quiet fury. Oh, sweetheart, that's just the beginning of what I have to tell you. 3 days after the funeral, I find the life insurance papers in Nathan's home office, not tucked away in a drawer or neatly filed, but scattered across his desk like discarded leaves, forms, receipts, and a post-it note scribbled with call summary policy in his hasty handwriting. My hands tremble as I sift through the papers. Then I see it, Lucas's life insurance policy, taken out 6 months after his diagnosis, $2 million. My breath catches as my eyes land on the beneficiary line, Nathan Thompson, sole recipient. My name has been crossed out. The change dated mere weeks before Lucas died. My phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Coffee shop on Main, now. Samantha. The name hits like a slap. Sam, the woman in the Hawaii photo, the same Sam from the post-it note. I find her exactly where she said she'd be, looking polished and expensive in a way that reeks of someone else's money. She doesn't stand as I approach, only stirs her coffee with calculated precision. I'm surprised you came, she says without looking up. And I'm surprised you had the nerve to contact me. Now she looks up, her gaze hard. Nathan's been promising me things, big things, but now he's not returning my calls. What kind of things? I ask, though I'm not sure I want the answer. A fresh start, a new life together. Her laugh is bitter. Funded by your son's insurance money. The room tilts sideways, and I grip the edge of the table to steady myself. He told you about that? He tells me everything. She pulls out her phone and scrolls through messages, including how he made sure you'd never see a penny of it. His mother's idea. Apparently, she never thought you deserved their family money. Why are you telling me this? She leans forward, her voice sharp. Because he's playing both of us. That policy? He promised to split it with me, but I did some digging. He's got gambling debts. Gabrielle, big ones. The kind that make people desperate. My throat is dry. You're lying. Samantha slides her phone across the table. Text messages, bank statements, photos, a digital trail of betrayal spanning months. Nathan and Linda plotting, Nathan and Samantha planning, Nathan at casinos, with loan sharks, at places he had no business being while our son was dying. I'm not the villain here, Samantha says quietly. I'm just another mark in his con. But unlike you, I've got nothing left to lose. I stand, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're wrong about one thing. I have nothing left to lose either. Samantha smiles, all teeth. Then maybe we should help each other. I look at her, the woman who helped destroy my family, and realize she might be exactly what I need, a weapon aimed straight at Nathan's heart. Later, I find my father sitting in Lucas's room, holding a worn stuffed penguin. It went with Lucas to every hospital stay, his comfort through endless treatments. You look just like your mother when she's planning something dangerous, he says, his voice unusually clear. I sink onto the bed beside him, the mattress still indented from where Lucas spent his final weeks. Dad, do you remember what we talked about yesterday? He strokes the penguin's matted fur. No, but I remember Lucas telling me about the trust fund. His brow furrows. Was that real? My heart skips. What trust fund, Dad? The one Nathan's father wanted to discuss. Robert came here when Lucas was sick. Said something about protecting family assets. His gaze drifts. Did I dream that? I take his hand, steadying my voice, despite the storm inside me. No, Dad, when exactly was this? Your mother was at the hospital with Lucas. Robert brought papers. His grip tightens, surprisingly strong. I didn't sign them. They felt wrong, like when you smell smoke but can't see the fire. The pieces click into place. Robert's unexpected visit, Linda's manipulations, Nathan's sudden interest in our family's property. It wasn't just about Lucas's insurance money. They were after everything. My phone buzzes again, a message from Samantha. Nathan's back, meeting with his lawyer tomorrow, something about property transfers. I should have protected you better, my father says, his voice cracking. Both of you. You did, Dad, I whisper, gripping his hand, by not signing those papers. I stand, my decision crystallizing, and now it's my turn. He holds out the penguin. Lucas knew. He told me not to worry about you because you're stronger than everyone thinks. His eyes cloud over. Who's Nathan? The familiar ache of watching him slip away mingles with a new, fiery determination. I take the penguin, its soft weight anchoring me to this moment. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's Uncle Peter. Found something in the property records. Come to my office, now. I kiss my father's forehead. I have to go, Dad, but I promise you, they won't take anything else from this family. Uncle Peter's office is a fortress of filing cabinets and legal documents, but what he shows me isn't buried in a drawer. It's on his computer, a series of property transfers dating back to when Lucas first got sick. They've been planning this for months, Peter says, scrolling through document after document, shell companies, hidden accounts, all leading back to Nathan and his parents. My fingers trace the dates on the screen. Each one aligns with a hospital stay, a chemotherapy session, a day when I was too consumed with saving Lucas to notice what Nathan was doing. Here's the kicker, Peter continues, pulling up another file. They used Lucas's medical bills to justify emergency sales of your joint assets. Everything's been quietly moved into accounts you can't access. A knock at the door startles us. It's Samantha, looking less polished than before. Sorry to interrupt, but Nathan's meeting got moved up. He's at the lawyer's office now. Peter glances at his watch. That's not possible. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. It was, Samantha says. Linda changed it. They're signing everything over today. Once it's done, she lets the sentence hang. My phone buzzes, a text from Nathan. We need to talk about the house, coming by later. The house, my parents' house, the place where my father still lives, the place where Lucas spent his final days, the property that's been in my family for generations. I square my shoulders. Show me everything. For the next hour, Peter and I sift through every document, every transfer, and every carefully constructed lie. Rage simmers beneath my calm exterior as we unravel Nathan's trail of gambling debts hidden behind corporate facades, Linda's systematic dismantling of our joint assets, and Robert's attempts to manipulate my father into signing away his rights. There's one more thing, Samantha says quietly, pulling out her phone. She presses play on a recording. Nathan's voice fills the room, discussing with Linda how they could use my father's condition to their advantage. The words echo like nails driven into a coffin, sealing away any lingering doubts. The recording ends, leaving only silence. In that silence, I hear Lucas's voice in my memory. Promise you won't let them take our home, Mom. We can stop them, Peter says, but we have to act now. I stand, gathering the documents we've printed. No, I'm not just going to stop them. I reach into my bag, pulling out Lucas's worn penguin and setting it on Peter's desk. I'm going to take everything back, and I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone else again. A faint smile curves Samantha's lips. I was hoping you'd say that. I know exactly where they've hidden the real estate contracts. Get your coat, I tell Peter, a fiery resolve building inside me. We're going to Nathan's lawyer's office, and this time, I'm not leaving without what's mine. The penguin watches silently as the three of us, unlikely allies forged by betrayal, step into the night. The lawyer's office feels cold, a calculated stage set for confrontation. Nathan sits across the polished conference table, flanked by Linda and Robert. Between us lies a thick stack of documents, a fortress of their deceit. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Nathan says, sliding the papers toward me. Just sign, for Lucas. My hand clenches around the USB drive in my pocket, the drive containing every piece of evidence Peter and I painstakingly gathered, fraudulent documents, recorded conversations, and an irrefutable paper trail. Don't you dare say his name, I bite out. Linda leans forward, her manicured nails tapping against the table in feigned sympathy. Gabrielle, dear, you're clearly not thinking clearly. Grief can make people. Her words are cut off by Samantha's sharp voice. Show them. She strides in, followed by Peter, her phone already in hand. Nathan pales. What is she doing here? Connecting the USB to the lawyer's computer, I watch the projector flicker to life. One by one, the evidence scrolls across the screen: property transfers, falsified signatures, and recordings of Nathan and Linda plotting to exploit my father's dementia. It's over, I say. Nathan's smile freezes me. Actually, he pulls out another folder, tossing it onto the table. The photographs inside make my stomach drop. Peter meeting with known criminals, bank statements showing questionable transfers, and emails hinting at tax fraud. Imagine how damaging this would be for your family, Linda says softly, her tone venomous. Your uncle's business destroyed, your mother implicated, your father uprooted from his home. Peter starts to protest, but Nathan cuts him off. We can make this all go away, or we can destroy everything you have left. Your choice. The room spins as every carefully laid plan crumbles before me. They weren't just stealing, they'd built their own insurance policy against exposure. Nathan stands, his tone smug. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Choose wisely. They leave, their threats hanging heavy in the air. The projector continues cycling through the evidence, now a testament to a battle I'm no longer certain I can win. They won't stop, Samantha whispers. They'll take everything, piece by piece. I stare at the last image on the screen, Lucas in the hospital, smiling weakly. Nathan, as always, was nowhere to be found. No, I say, my voice steady, they won't take anything else, not from me. It's time we stop playing their game, we're changing the rules. That night, my mother's kitchen transforms into a war room. Documents cover every surface as Margaret, my mother, lays out her own secret cache of evidence, years of surveillance, bank statements, and recorded conversations. I've been tracking Nathan's schemes since Lucas's first hospital stay, she explains. I knew something wasn't right when he started pressuring your father about the property titles. Peter studies one of the documents, his face lighting up. These transfers, they're legally binding, but they're not what Nathan thinks they are. A knock at the door makes us freeze. Samantha steps inside, her phone recording. They're on their way. Linda convinced Nathan, tonight's the night to force your hand. Perfect timing, my mother says, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Peter pulls up more files, every property Nathan tried to steal, every asset he thought he owned, all legally transferred into a trust in Lucas's name. How? I whisper. Your father had more clear days than they realized, Margaret says. We made sure everything was properly signed and notarized during those moments. Nathan was too busy creating fake documents to notice the real ones. Headlights sweep across the windows, and car doors slam. Remember, Peter says, his voice urgent. Let them think they're in control. When Nathan bursts in, his smile is triumphant, until Samantha presses play on her phone. The recordings play, Nathan and Linda confessing to fraud, discussing how to manipulate my father, and plotting every move. You set us up, Nathan snarls, lunging forward. No, I say, my voice cold. You set yourself up. Every fake document, every fraudulent transfer, they've already been sent to the FBI. Linda reaches for her folder of threats, but my mother snatches it. Looking for these? She asks, her tone steel. Funny thing about evidence, it works both ways. Nathan's face twists in rage. You can't. I already have. I cut him off. The only question now is how far you want to take this, because I'm ready to lose everything to make sure you lose more. The silence that follows is deafening. The next morning, as frost crunches beneath my feet, I visit Lucas's grave. I set his penguin against the stone, its familiar weight grounding me. You'd be proud, Lucas, I whisper. We protected what mattered. My father joins me, more lucid than usual. Lucas told me not to worry about you. He said you'd find your strength. I smile softly. Did he? He nods, touching the penguin. Funny thing about strength, it sometimes looks like revenge, but it's really just love wearing armor. The weight of everything, the battles, the loss, the hard-won justice, settles on my shoulders. It isn't triumph, it's survival. As we turn to leave, a monarch butterfly flutters onto Lucas's headstone, its wings glowing like stained glass. Let it be, I tell my father as he reaches for it. The butterfly takes flight, free and unburdened, and for the first time, I understand what it means to let go. The inheritance was all mine. Father would be happier if his son inherited everything rather than some woman who isn't even related by blood. You're not my sister anymore, I'm cutting ties with you, my brother declared with a sneering smile. Indeed, to our father, I wasn't related by blood. I was my mother's child from a previous relationship. Still, he had loved me as his own daughter, which made him very special to me. I was furious that my brother wanted to monopolize everything our father left behind, but his words about cutting ties with me brought a sense of relief. Fine by me, once you inherit, don't ever contact me again, I replied. Like I'd ever do that, and don't expect a single penny from me later, he shot back. I'm Kelly, a 29-year-old civil servant. My brother, Steve, is 22 and just graduated from university. He often brags about his prestigious job at a well-known company, always looking down on the rural city office where I work. Must be Dad's genes, right? I've got the blood of a father who worked for a major corporation, he'd boast, smugly emphasizing the bloodline he shares with our father. Steve and I share the same mother but have different fathers. Steve is the biological son of our father, while I am my mother's child from her previous marriage. Though I was technically a stepchild, Dad never treated me differently. He loved and cared for me deeply, which is why I regard him as my true father. My biological father, on the other hand, left us when I was little, running off with his mistress. I barely remember him. When Steve was younger, he didn't care about our different fathers, but everything changed after our mother passed away in a tragic car accident when I was an adult and Steve was still in middle school. Grieving and unable to cope, Steve started blaming me. At the funeral, he screamed, "Why did Mom have to die? It should have been you. No one would care if the step-sibling was gone." His cruel words shocked me, but I stayed silent as our father, angrier than I'd ever seen him, scolded Steve harshly. That day, any affection I had for my brother faded. Over the years, our relationship deteriorated. Steve seemed obsessed with outshining me academically, but his ambitions always backfired. He failed to get into his first-choice schools for both high school and university. As a student, he couldn't out-earn me, a full-time employee, and he avoided sports or arts to escape potential failure. Instead, Steve focused on asserting his higher status as Dad's biological son. He taunted me endlessly, saying, "I'm Dad's real child, you're just an outsider." Initially, I believed his behavior stemmed from misplaced grief, but as he grew older, his words carried genuine malice. Exhausted by his provocations, I started avoiding him altogether. When Steve decided to live at home during university, I moved out to my own apartment. I even coordinated visits with Dad to ensure I wouldn't run into him. 4 years later, Steve graduated and landed a job at a reputable company. I had prepared a tie as a graduation gift, but decided against giving it to him when he greeted me with his usual smugness. "Of course, I got a better job than you. I've got Dad's genes," he said, clearly unchanged by his time at university. I continued living independently, working as a civil servant, while Steve lived with Dad and navigated the struggles of a new working adult. Unfortunately, this phase didn't last long. Less than a year later, Dad fell gravely ill and passed away suddenly, leaving me no time to say goodbye. At the funeral, I took on the responsibilities of the chief mourner. Thanks to Dad's meticulous planning, most of the arrangements were straightforward, except for the inheritance. The only inheritors were Steve and me, and I knew the discussion would lead to conflict. As expected, Steve showed up late to our meeting without so much as an apology and immediately said, "The inheritance? I'm the real child, so it's all mine. You're just a stepchild, an outsider. Isn't it greedy for an outsider to claim anything?" Tired of his arrogance, I offered a deal. "I won't inherit anything. In return, you must promise never to contact me for the rest of your life." "Deal? Like I'd ever contact you. Just disappear," he said, sneering. Disgusted, I left the meeting. The next day, I visited a lawyer to formalize my renunciation of the inheritance. "Kelly, as a stepchild, you technically don't have inheritance rights," the lawyer started. "Actually, Dad adopted me legally," I interrupted, "but I don't want anything. I'm giving it all up." Dad had officially adopted me after marrying my mother, which meant I had full inheritance rights, but I wanted nothing to do with the complications of being labeled a stepchild or a legitimate child. I simply wanted to cut ties and move on. A month later, the family court finalized my renunciation. I was finally free from the burdens of my brother and the toxic family dynamic. I contacted Steve. "Hello, my renunciation of the inheritance is complete," I began. From the estate investigation, Dad had." "Shut up," Steve cut me off angrily. "I get it. You've renounced the inheritance. Stop acting like you're my real sister, and don't ever contact me again." He hung up before I could say another word. I sighed deeply, knowing Steve. It was only a matter of time before he came crying back for help. That thought made me feel even worse. 3 months later, the calls and emails started coming in, numerous and persistent. I reluctantly answered one of his calls, hearing his exhausted voice on the other end. "You know what? I need to borrow some money," he said. "Dad had debts, and I can't keep up with the repayments. I used Dad's savings too, but it's still not enough." "What? Sure, Dad had some loans to repay, but if you've used all his savings for it, how is it still this bad?" I asked, confused. Steve immediately snapped. "Did you know about this? Did you push the debt onto me, knowing everything? You have such a bad personality." "Oh, right, because you're just a stepchild. You must be jealous of me, the legitimate child." I clenched my jaw. "Right, because I'm the one who hung up on you when I tried to warn you, and I'm the one who blocked your calls. Funny how you suddenly unblocked me when you needed help. Who's the one with the bad personality here?" The truth was, I had learned all about Dad's financial situation during the inheritance renunciation process. I had tried to inform Steve back then, but he had cut me off entirely, left with no way to communicate. I had given up trying. Now, he was coming to me in tears, just as I had anticipated. "Do you even understand how hard it was for Dad to send you to high school and university?" I asked, frustrated. "Sure, he had educational insurance and Mom's life insurance helped, but things like the house and car had to be paid for with loans. I'm not your sister, right? So why don't you take this up with the mortgage lender or the lawyer instead of me, an outsider?" "What are you talking about?" Steve retorted. "Don't sweat the small stuff. Besides, I'm treating you like a sister, even though you're just a stepchild. You should be happy about that. Now, come on, Kelly, give me some money." Furious at his arrogance, I sharply hung up the call and blocked his number. Steve didn't know where I lived, and I had made sure not to leave any clues about my home at Dad's house. To be safe, I even got a new phone. But that didn't stop him. "Kelly, please, I need money, otherwise, I can't survive." Steve started showing up at the city office where I worked. Gone was his usual smugness. He looked genuinely distressed. He would visit repeatedly, always during lunch breaks, as if sneaking away from his job. On days he didn't visit, he bombarded my phone with calls, disrupting my work. I explained the situation to my boss, and they moved me to an administrative position, but Steve's harassment escalated. He began staying past closing hours, waiting in the parking lot to confront me after work. One evening, I finally had enough. I caught him lingering in the parking lot and dragged him aside. "Stop it already," I said. "Don't cause trouble at my workplace. I told you to consult the loan institutions and the lawyer." "I already did," Steve snapped, arms crossed, anger flashing in his eyes. "The group life insurance covered the mortgage, so I don't have to pay for the house anymore. The car loan is down to about $5,000, and I renegotiated the payments, but that's not the problem." "Then what is the problem?" I pressed. Steve hesitated, nervously looking around before finally admitting, "Dad had some savings, so I spent it on various things. I went over budget. Then I borrowed money from a friend, but now I can't pay him back. He's saying I scammed him, and no one else will lend me money. If I go to a predatory lender, I'll be in even deeper trouble." I sighed, my head pounding. His story was convoluted, but the truth was clear. Steve had spiraled into a financial mess of his own making. "So, let me get this straight," I said. "You kept borrowing money to pay off debts, and now you're stuck." "Exactly," he said, his desperation growing. "I think I'm already blacklisted. If you pay it off for me, it'll all be over. Just $88,000, come on, Kelly." When he reached out to me, I slapped his hand away. "There's no way I'm giving you a dime," I said coldly. "This is entirely your fault for overspending and borrowing from loan sharks. Why should I clean up your mess?" Steve glared at me, his voice dripping with contempt. "Is it because we're only half related? Stepchildren are the worst, so selfish and unpleasant." Without another word, I got into my car and started the engine. Steve tried to cling to the door, but I shoved him off. "You promised never to contact me again in exchange for the inheritance," I reminded him. "You've broken that promise, begged for money, and insulted me. I don't owe you anything. If you show up again, I'll call the police." "Kelly, please." I didn't let him finish. I drove off, leaving him behind in the parking lot. Steve continued to harass the city hall after that, showing up uninvited and lingering until closing time. He called multiple departments, disrupting their work. He didn't make a scene at the counters, so reporting him as a nuisance was difficult. Finally, I decided it was best to disappear. I explained everything to HR and was transferred to a branch office in the mountains. It was a quieter place, with fewer residents, but the work felt more fulfilling. I never returned to my old office. I didn't regret cutting ties with Steve, nor did I miss the complications of being labeled a stepchild or a legitimate child. Free at last, I could focus on building a life of my own, far from my brother's shadow. I urgently called Edward, explaining that our parents were gravely ill and that he needed to return home immediately. Despite my heartfelt pleas, he dismissed my concerns coldly, insisting he was too tied up with a work trip and accusing me of overreacting. He abruptly ended the call, ignoring my attempts to keep him on the line. For weeks later, when Edward finally returned home, indifferent and distant, I had the painful task of telling him that he had missed both of our parents' funerals. Shocked and bewildered, he couldn't comprehend what I was saying, thinking it was some kind of cruel joke. I reminded him of the call I made, warning him about their critical health condition, and his face fell as regret washed over him, leaving him speechless. My name is Janet Rachel, a 51-year-old woman who has devoted her life to family, stepping away from a promising career in administration after marriage. My journey with Edward began in college, where we connected through our shared love for paddle. Initially, our relationship was strained. Edward, the leader of the paddle club and focused on national competitions, was harsh and demanding. He only cared about skill, not the experience, and I often found myself relegated to the sidelines, picking up balls after failing to meet his high expectations. But my frustration turned into determination. I practiced relentlessly in private, and during a practice session, to everyone's surprise, including Edward's, I successfully returned one of his challenging serves. That moment earned his respect and admiration, and for the first time, our relationship shifted from animosity to a budding connection. From that point on, my feelings for Edward deepened, despite his continued strict demeanor. I found myself falling for him, and our bond grew stronger. During one of our monthly gatherings, after a social night, Edward unexpectedly confessed his feelings for me, admitting he had fallen in love. Surprised but elated, I eagerly accepted, and we decided to keep our relationship a secret from the club to avoid disrupting the team dynamics. I was so in love that the secrecy didn't matter. Being with Edward was all I wanted. Our relationship endured beyond college, and we married when I was 23. At Edward's suggestion, I left my job to commit to being by his side. I was completely captivated by him, imagining a bright future together. Now, 25 years later, our life has settled into a more predictable routine. The excitement of our early days has given way to a comfortable, familiar life. My attention to personal style has relaxed. Where once I meticulously chose outfits and applied makeup for every date, I now favor comfort and rarely wear makeup. As a homemaker who rarely interacts with anyone outside our home, I've embraced a natural look. Reflecting on these changes, I can't help but notice how much I've changed since my younger years. I've gained weight, and my appearance now mirrors the before photos seen in weight loss ads. This shift in how I look might be contributing to the more routine nature of our relationship, and I sense that Edward now sees me less as a passionate partner and more as a maternal figure. He even makes light-hearted comments, asking for coffee in a way that feels more like a caretaker's role than a wife's. This gradual transformation in our dynamic marks a significant evolution from those early days of love and ambition. Edward's parents live just a 20-minute walk away, and they have always been kind and supportive. In return, I visit them often, eager to help, especially as their health has been failing. My father-in-law is battling a serious illness, and the doctors have given him little hope. He expressed a wish to spend his remaining days at home, and we brought him home for palliative care. The strain has been heavy on my mother-in-law, who seems increasingly worn out by the burden of caring for him. As someone who doesn't work outside the home, I've tried to step in and support, but the toll of it all is beginning to weigh on me as well. I've been helping my mother-in-law nearly every day, yet it's clear that the full responsibility of caring for my father-in-law falls on her shoulders, and it's visibly taking a toll. One evening, she asked if I could stay the night to assist her, her voice filled with hope. I had to decline, though, because Edward, my husband, expects me to be home every night. My refusal left her disheartened, her disappointment clear. Edward has a commanding presence, and he's never been one to help with household chores. He expects dinner to be ready and the house in order when he returns, and leftovers are not an option. Any deviation from his expectations often leads to an intense reaction. One day, I arrived home late after helping my father-in-law, only to be met with Edward's anger. He prioritized his needs over his father's, and I remained silent, knowing that arguing would only make things worse. This dynamic has left me feeling trapped. As a homemaker, I feel guilty for not standing up to Edward or offering my mother-in-law the support she needs during this difficult time. Edward's behavior has been increasingly erratic. He often comes home late without notice, sometimes clearly intoxicated, and his excuse is always the same: he has the right to spend his money however he pleases. This pattern has left me feeling isolated, torn between my duties as a wife and my desire to support my in-laws. Despite my role at home, Edward's expectations have become harder to accept. His frequent nights out were beginning to concern me, not just for our family, but for the families of those he spent time with. Edward, with his authoritative position at work, often used his power to pressure colleagues into socializing after hours. He would boast about always going out with the same coworker, a man who lived alone and was single, claiming that his colleague was always eager for company and drinks. I tried suggesting a compromise to Edward, asking if he could inform me ahead of time about his plans so I could better support his parents, especially with his father's worsening health and his mother's increasing stress. But Edward dismissed my concerns with a laugh, insisting his outings were spontaneous and that his mother could manage on her own. He prioritized his needs over everything, even rushing me through household tasks, without regard for my feelings. Then, unexpectedly, Edward announced he was planning a 3-week trip to Thailand. I was stunned, filled with questions. He had taken the initiative to request time off work and had already thought about what he wanted to do and eat there. When I asked about the sudden trip and mentioned that I didn't have a passport, he casually replied that it didn't matter because I wouldn't be joining him. This was particularly surprising, since we hadn't even gone on a proper honeymoon. Given his usual stance on saving money, curious and concerned. I asked who he would be traveling with. His response was curt: he was going with a co-worker, and then he quickly shifted the conversation to ask about dinner. I knew pressing for more details would likely lead to an argument, so I reluctantly accepted the situation, my frustration simmering as I prepared dinner just as Edward wished. On the day of his departure, he left early in the morning, beginning his trip without a word of further discussion. By noon, I found myself reflecting on the dynamics of our relationship, recognizing how difficult it was to express my needs and concerns within the constraints set by Edward's behavior and expectations. In a moment of urgency, I called Edward, only to be met with impatience. "What do you want? I'm about to board a plane," he snapped, irritation clear in his voice. I pleaded with him, explaining the dire state of his parents' health and urging him to reconsider his trip. But Edward dismissed me coldly, claiming he was on vacation and telling me to handle the situation myself. His lack of empathy stung as he hung up, leaving my calls unanswered thereafter. Murmuring a quiet promise of regret, I resigned myself to waiting for his return. 3 weeks later, when Edward finally came back, he seemed unaffected by the events that had unfolded in his absence. I confronted him with the news of his parents' passing, and he reacted with disbelief, questioning me as if I were playing a cruel joke. I explained the heartbreaking details of how his parents had deteriorated and passed away, despite my constant visits and care. Their sudden decline was something I couldn't prevent, and the guilt weighed heavily on me. My anger toward Edward grew, fueled by the memory of his parents' suffering and his complete disregard for their well-being. It was clear he had always placed his own desires above his family's needs, a fact that was impossible to ignore in the face of such tragedy. Confronting him, I accused him of prioritizing a leisure trip over the well-being of his parents. Edward's silence spoke volumes. He seemed unable to face the reality of his choices and the consequences they had brought. In that moment, my disappointment and frustration with him were overwhelming. His carefree demeanor after returning from his vacation stood in sharp contrast to the grim situation at home, underscoring the profound selfishness of his actions. My heart ached, not just for the loss of my in-laws, but also for the realization that the man I had hoped would stand by me in difficult times had chosen himself above all else. With a hint of sarcasm, I probed further, asking about his recent 4-week getaway, suggesting it might have been with a lover. Edward, seemingly defeated, admitted to his affair with Donna, a younger co-worker who, in his words, brought him comfort like nothing I could. His confession revealed that his late nights weren't spent working late but with Donna, and he boasted about her qualities in comparison to mine, arrogantly undermining my worth. What came next was even more shocking. With his parents no longer around to object, Edward bluntly suggested a divorce, envisioning a future where he could live with Donna in our home, effectively telling me to leave. The proposal hit me like a blow to the chest. Having dedicated my life to being a homemaker at Edward's request, I had no income of my own and little confidence to start over. But the realization that he had chosen his mistress over attending to his ailing parents was the final straw. With firm resolve, I left him for good. I packed only the essentials and soon found refuge in a budget motel. A week into my new reality, Edward's call broke my peace. His voice was panicked over a missing checkbook. Unfazed, I informed him that the financial documents and accounts under his name were untouched at home, only the checkbook was missing. I had taken only what was mine, the savings I had built up over time and the gifts from my family, all safely tucked away in an account in my name. It wasn't part of our joint property, and I had no obligation to share it with him. Edward, however, was desperate. He had squandered his salary and bonus on his lavish trip and was now hoping to dip into my savings to cover his recklessness. For the first time, it became clear to me just how much Edward had taken my financial stability for granted. He expected me to clean up his mess, but I refused. I suggested he get an advance from his paycheck if he needed money that badly. It was his responsibility to face the consequences of his actions, not mine. As the conversation wore on, I couldn't help but fill him in on the harsh financial reality of his parents' situation. There would be no significant inheritance coming his way. His parents had lived off their pensions, and his father's healthcare costs had eaten through almost everything they had. I also warned him to vacate their rental apartment to avoid further costs. It was a reality check he clearly wasn't ready for, and he struggled to grasp it. With a newfound sense of independence, I told Edward he was on his own. I had no obligation to support him anymore. His reaction, full of disbelief and desperation, did nothing to sway me. His previous actions had already drained any sympathy I might have had for him. I couldn't help but laugh at his situation. After all, This mess was his own doing. His affair with Donna and the way he'd thrown me out of our home without considering the financial implications had brought him to this point. His concerns about his job and the potential fallout from his affair were of no concern to me. I made it clear that he and Donna were the architects of their downfall, and I had no pity for them. Edward continued to plead, acknowledging his mistakes, but I remained unmoved. I ended the call with a final warning of regret, and that was it. Any obligations I had to him were over. The divorce process began soon after. Edward was initially hesitant, mostly due to financial concerns and the fear of his actions becoming public, but eventually, he was convinced by legal counsel to proceed. The divorce marked the end of a chapter defined by his betrayal and financial mismanagement. Thanks to my lawyer's expertise, the division of assets was favorable for me. Edward, who had already wasted most of his savings, found himself in a precarious financial situation after the divorce. He struggled to make ends meet, even dealing with the fallout from having to clear out his parents' apartment and cover the rental costs. Donna, who had originally sought Edward for professional gain, quickly distanced herself when the affair became public. She saw no further use for him and moved on, leaving Edward even more isolated. After everything unraveled, Edward sought to reconnect with me indirectly through our lawyer. His attempts to win me back and request financial assistance were relayed to me with a hint of irony. The desperation in his voice as he begged for help only reinforced my decision to cut ties with him completely. His financial struggles and inability to manage his life after the divorce were a direct consequence of his own decisions. Meanwhile, I had begun to move forward. I decided to re-enter the workforce and landed a part-time job at a local convenience store. It was a brand new experience for me, and I found myself enjoying it far more than I expected. I quickly adapted to the physical demands, whether it was manning the register, managing inventory, or keeping the store tidy. The work was a welcome change, and my manager even mentioned that I might secure a permanent position. It was a small, but hopeful, step toward rebuilding my life. Looking back, I see this chapter not as a decline, but as a midpoint full of potential. The end of my marriage wasn't a setback, but a launchpad for new beginnings. As I navigate this next phase of life, I do so with a renewed sense of purpose and joy, eager to embrace whatever opportunities lie ahead. My name is Bella, and life has a way of teaching you who's really in control. Not long ago, I would have eagerly told anyone about my marriage to Willie, brimming with the joy of a newlywed. I truly believed that leaving my promising career at Ventic Tech to focus on our marriage was the right decision. Love, after all, is supposed to be worth more than money, isn't it? Ventic Tech had its quirks, but it also had strict policies, especially about workplace relationships. Once Willie and I tied the knot, we were thrust into an awkward spotlight. Our boss, Gary, wasted no time delivering an ultimatum, with all the theatrics of a reality show host. That evening, our conversation felt like a scene from a high-stakes drama. Blinded by love, I caved. The next day, I handed in my resignation and walked away from a career I had worked so hard to build. Fast forward to today, and here I am, cleaning up spilled cereal because Willie, ever the soon-to-be promoted, can't manage to aim for his bowl. Didn't your mother teach you better? I shout, half joking, toward the living room. My words disappear into the walls, his defensive reply arriving just as invisibly. I let it go. It's not worth another argument. Once, we teased each other with ease. Now, every conversation feels like navigating a minefield. Hours later, Willie is glued to the couch, the TV casting a dull glow over his indifferent face. I glance at the untouched dinner table, the remnants of what we once had haunting the silence. Are we going to talk? Or is that couch your new lifelong commitment? I ask, forcing the words out. About what? His reply is sharp and dismissive, without even a glance in my direction. I count to 12, clinging to patience. About us, about where this mess is heading. My voice cracks slightly. He shrugs. That shrug, heavier than any shout, fills the room with a suffocating silence. The TV chatters on, oblivious to the collapse happening within its reach. That's when it hits me. Our marriage, once so sturdy, now feels like a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. The bond we'd built is crumbling, piece by piece, and neither of us seems to know how to stop it. Life, with its cruel irony, has turned our plans and dreams into fragile remnants of what once was. I linger, watching him. The man on the couch feels like a stranger, a distant passenger I might pass on the street. The shift from warmth to indifference was subtle but devastating, like the first bite of frost signaling the end of summer. Later that evening, I prepare his favorite meal, steak, seasoned and cooked just the way he likes, or so I thought. As he enters the kitchen, his heavy footsteps foreshadow his sour mood. He scans the table like a predator sizing up its prey. He picks up a piece of steak with his hands, ignoring the utensils beside him. Is this the best you can do now? His tone is gritty, like sandpaper. It's slightly cooler than usual, I reply cautiously, referring to the temperature. Not what? He snaps, his glare cutting into me. I bite my tongue, holding back the flood of thoughts. Speaking up would only make things worse. When I say I want my steak hot, he continues, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. I expect to feel the life leaving it as I cut in. This, he jabs the steak with his fork, is already dead and gone. His words, devoid of any shouting, carry a venom so sharp it leaves me hollow. He pushes the plate away and meets my gaze for a fleeting moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of contempt and resignation. Forget it, he mutters, turning away, grabbing his keys. He delivers a final blow. Fix your mistakes, Bella, or next time, it won't just be dinner getting tossed out. The door slams shut behind him, the echo punctuating the end of what little joy remained in our relationship. I stand there, staring at the uneaten meal, wondering how we reached this point, and if there's any way back. I stood motionless, staring at the door Willie had slammed shut behind him. The sound still echoed in the silence of the apartment, reverberating like a final punctuation to an unspoken truth. I exhaled slowly, glancing down at the abandoned steak on the table. Its cold, lifeless state mirrored my own feelings, discarded and forlorn. Each step toward the trash can felt heavier than the last, a somber reminder of what I was throwing away, my effort, my care, and the fragile hope that things could still change. To the outside world, we were the picture of a perfect couple, admired by friends, praised by his parents, but behind closed doors, the reality was far from ideal. Willie's demands had become relentless, chipping away at my self-esteem with every passing day. My life revolved around seeking his approval, which had grown as rare as sunlight in a storm. Tonight was no different. The dinner table became a stage for his critiques. What's this? He asked flatly, pointing at the plate of steamed broccoli and grilled chicken I had set before him. Dinner, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Broccoli again? Do you know how to make anything else? His words dripped with disdain as he pushed the plate away like it was contaminated. Suppressing a retort, I offered, I can make something else. His sneer was immediate. That would be a first. The sting of his words fueled a simmering anger within me, but I turned back to the kitchen. Before I could start anew, his sharp voice cut through the air. Where are you going? To cook, I answered, barely keeping the edge out of my tone. He stood abruptly, the screech of his chair grating against the floor. Sit down. Let's not pretend you have other plans. Your world revolves around me, remember? His words were a leash, yanking me back into the reality I'd been too afraid to confront. Yeah, I murmured, defeated, returning to the table. Later that night, as silence filled the apartment, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of unsaid words and unmet dreams pressed down on me. This wasn't a partnership, it was a prison, built on dependence, fear, and a facade of perfection. But life has a way of intervening in unexpected ways. One cold, ordinary day, I slipped on a patch of ice while carrying groceries. Pain shot through my leg, sharp and unforgiving. A few bystanders rushed to help, their concern a stark contrast to the indifference I had grown accustomed to. At the hospital, a doctor confirmed what I already suspected: my leg was broken. It's broken, he said matter-of-factly, as if announcing the weather. The real pain wasn't from the injury but from the dread of telling Willie. I sent him a text, broke my leg. At the hospital, his response never came. That night in the hospital was cold and lonely. The nurses were efficient but distant, and the stale coffee did little to warm me. By morning, I was discharged with crutches, a cast as stark as the snow outside, and a pile of instructions. Willie was waiting when I got home, his face stormy, no concern, no questions about how I was feeling. His first words were, "Where's dinner?" Standing there on crutches, my leg immobilized, something inside me snapped. What do you think happened? I went dancing? Look at my leg, I yelled, my voice cracking under the weight of all I'd held back. He barely flinched. His only response was a dismissive wave of his hand as he turned away, muttering about how I should have been more careful. In that moment, the full extent of his selfishness and neglect hit me like a tidal wave. The life I had tried so hard to salvage wasn't just broken, it was unsalvageable. Willie's tirade made his feelings painfully clear. My broken leg was, in his eyes, an inconvenience I had inflicted on him. You always have excuses, he spat bitterly. You can't even do the one thing you're supposed to, can you? I stared at him, astounded. After a harrowing night in the hospital, his only concern was dinner. The sheer indifference stung more than my injury. The air between us felt as cold as the ice I'd slipped on. A chilling confirmation that this was more than a physical wound, it was a fracture in our relationship, one that had been forming for years. Despite my trembling hands and aching body, I limped to the kitchen and began preparing dinner. Each step felt like an eternity, a cruel mockery of my efforts to maintain normalcy. Near the trash bin, overflowing from a day of neglect, I hesitated. I knew Willie wouldn't let it go. "What's this?" he barked, his sharp tone cutting through the tension. "You're home all day and can't even handle the trash?" He stormed over, fury radiating off him, and with a swift kick, he sent the contents sprawling across the floor. "Clean it up," he commanded. My hands shook as I knelt down, not from the physical pain, but from a deeper, more profound hurt. That night, sleep eluded me as his harsh words echoed in my head, mingling with the hot sting of tears. By morning, nothing had changed except my resolve. The kitchen table was now adorned with divorce papers. As the coffee dripped in the background, Willie stumbled in, bleary-eyed and reeking of alcohol. "Morning," he growled, his voice rough. "What's for breakfast?" Without a word, I pushed the papers toward him. He glanced down, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "You serious?" he scoffed. "As a heart attack," I replied, my heart pounding but my voice steady. He laughed, loud and dismissive. "You ain't got the guts." "I already filed," I countered, meeting his sneer with a steady gaze. "Just need your signature." He leaned in close, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can survive without me? You're a broken bird, can't even take out the trash." "I'm done talking, Willie," I said firmly. "Sign the papers, or I'll have the authorities force you to." His face twisted with rage, but he grabbed the pen and scrawled his name, each stroke heavy and deliberate, tossing the pen down like it burned him. He sneered. "Good luck, darling, you'll be crawling back before the month's up." But I wouldn't, I couldn't. This was my line in the sand. The moment I refused to accept any more of his cruelty. Despite everything, I smiled. Those signed papers felt like my first step, on crutches, maybe, but toward a better life. "Crawling's not my style," I murmured. The next morning, an eerie silence greeted me. Over coffee, Willie casually mentioned the property split. "Got a lawyer," he said, his tone as commanding as ever. "You coming with me?" Still healing, with my choices seeming limited, I nodded. Willie helped me into the car, his actions oddly gentle as he propped up my cast. Everything felt strangely normal as we drove, the city skyline shrinking behind us like a distant memory. Suddenly, he pulled over to the side of the highway. "The tire might need air," he mumbled, stepping out to inspect it. Leaning heavily on the car, I followed, unsure of his intentions. He pretended to fuss with the tires, his movements calculated. Then, without warning, he jumped back into the driver's seat. Before I could react, he hit the gas and sped off, leaving me stranded. I stood there, stunned, watching his car vanish down the highway, the sound of the engine fading into silence. I gripped my crutches tightly, disbelieving but strangely resolute. Alone on that desolate stretch of road, I realized this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of my freedom. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and called him in desperation. Willie's voice came through cold and smug. "Come back," I yelled, my voice cracking with frustration and fear. He just laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "This is what you get for trying to divorce me," he sneered before hanging up. The line went dead, and I stood there, the taillights of his car fading into the distance, alone on the side of a desolate road. The winter chill gnawed at me, a cruel echo of my abandonment. Cars sped past, their drivers oblivious to my plight, their indifference stinging as much as the icy wind. Minutes turned into an eternity until finally, a rattling Jeep truck pulled up beside me. To my shock, it was Gary, my former boss. His gruff, familiar voice broke through my haze. "You look like hell, Bella," he said, his concern cutting through the cold. "Why didn't you call someone?" I shrugged, the weight of the day pressing down on me. "Thought I could handle it," I murmured, ashamed of how wrong I'd been. Gary's expression darkened. "He left you here, with a broken leg? That man's a coward," he growled, helping me into the warmth of his Jeep. The drive to Ventic Tech was quiet but heavy with unspoken understanding. Gary guided me into his office, where he handed me a steaming mug of coffee. The warmth seeped into my frozen hands, thawing both my body and my spirits. "Thanks," I said softly, taking a sip. Gary paced, his agitation evident. "I can't believe that bastard," he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then, turning to face me, he asked, "What are you going to do now, Bella?" "I don't know," I admitted, the uncertainty of my future looming large. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "We need you back here. The team hasn't been the same since you left." A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. "You serious?" "As a heart attack," he replied. "You're the best we ever had. I should have fought harder to keep you." I glanced down at my cast. "Might be tricky with this." Gary waved off my concern. "We'll manage. I'll wait until you're ready. No excuses, no saying no." I smiled faintly, touched by his belief in me. "I'll think about it," I said, though deep down, I'd already decided. The tension in the office was palpable as Willie stormed in the next morning. His boots thudded across the floor with less certainty than usual. When he saw me standing beside Gary, his face paled before quickly hardening into a sneer. "What's this about?" he barked, his voice edged with defiance. Gary gestured to a chair. "Sit," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Willie remained standing, crossing his arms in a show of bravado. "Willie," Gary began, his gaze cold and cutting, "I've seen some poor decisions in my time, but what you've done takes the cake." Willie's eyes darted to me, his expression a mix of anger and fear. "What lies has she been feeding you?" "No lies needed," I replied calmly, "just the truth, recorded loud and clear." Gary slid a recording device across the desk. "Care to listen to your greatest hits?" Willie's face went ashen. "You can't fire me over this," he sputtered. "Oh, I can, and I am," Gary shot back, his voice like steel. Willie's desperation mounted. "I'll sue." "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold, "but you'll lose. I've got all the evidence I need, and you've got nothing but empty threats." Gary stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor like a declaration of war. "Get out, Willie, you're done here." Willie stormed out, defeated, and the weight of his departure lifted from my shoulders. In court, the judge's gavel fell decisively. "This court grants the separation and orders compensation to be paid," the judge declared. It felt like the first breath of spring, chilly but full of promise. Back at work, I settled into a rhythm, every keystroke a step toward rebuilding my life. My colleagues' greetings were warm, their support unwavering. "Feels weird, huh?" Harold said one morning, leaning against my desk. I smiled. "Weird doesn't cover it. Feels like I've come back from the dead." He chuckled. "Zombie Bella, back for revenge?" "Something like that," I said, grinning, "but this time, I'm not taking crap from anyone." "That's the spirit," Harold said, his nod full of encouragement. This wasn't just a fresh start, it was a reclaimed life, and I was ready to live it on my terms.